want to prove the Quran wrong? It is very easy. You want to prove the Quran wrong? You die now. You want to prove the Quran wrong? It is very easy. You want to prove the Quran wrong? You die now. You want to prove the Quran wrong? It is very easy. You want to prove the Quran wrong? You die now. You want to prove the Quran wrong? It is very easy. You want to prove the Quran wrong? You die now. You want to prove the Quran wrong? It is very easy. You want to prove the Quran wrong? You die now. You want to prove the Quran wrong? It is very easy. You want to prove the Quran wrong? You die now. You want to
All right. We are live. Welcome back to Reason Answers, your home for all your
crackhead clown individuals.
We're definitely going to be talking about some crackhead clown individuals today because we're going to indirectly be talking about Mohammed Hijab, or maybe I should say he is the inspiration for today's stream. Una says DCCI had a stream last night peppered with a Muslim man defending hijab. Some went so far as to imply that it's a woman's job to make sure she doesn't marry a narcissist, and women are drawn to
domestic abusers.
Domestic abusers. Thank you. I did not know what DA stood for. Welcome to the stream, Mary. Is Una correct here?
According to Islamic beliefs about marriage, Una would be correct that Islam does not see marriage as it's like why not? That's what women are for. It's their own fault if they get in this. So who cares? Who cares? So if you do not feel that this is true about women, then maybe you should stop defending Islam. And if you're in Islam, you should get out, because this is Islam and this is what Islam believes about women and marriage. And any other view is imported from the West, frankly. It is a Western view from Christianity imported into Islam because they have acquired it through cultural contacts.
So today we're going to be talking about Islamic marriage and seeing what is actually taught, because we have hijab going on record and saying that men can have a secret second wife, that they can lie to their first wife about it. Even if she directly asks him, he can just make up any kind of lie that he wants. Some Muslims who are perhaps corrupted by Western values, Western liberal values, as they like to call it, but really by Christian values, might think otherwise. But let's see what Muhammad, the prophet, would have thought, what the early Islamic jurists thought, what the source texts have to say. So that's what we're going to be discussing today, because we want to find out the truth of the matter here. Is Mohammed Hijab a disgusting person in spite of his religion or because of his religion? I guess would be the question here.
Yep. That is it. All right. So we're going to begin by kind of defining what on earth marriage is, because so many people who are either Christian or have been influenced by Christianity to such an extent that they don't grasp what it is considered in other contexts. So to begin with, the Bible teaches about marriage as companionate, fundamentally companionate. It's about the union of two people to form a new community. It is a community of the household, which is a fundamental unit of society. And of course, some people don't marry, and for good reasons and for bad reasons, both. Yet the fundamental unit of society consists of a man and his wife and then their offspring. And the nuclear family, in which the man and the wife and the offspring are a completely new, separate unit that is detached from other ties, is established back in Genesis, which would be quite revolutionary for an ancient context. I mean, you get all the people who are now like, oh, you know, my son should never leave my house, and the parents who continue to live with their children forever, yes, there is a place that when your parents get older, you take care of them and they come and stay with you if they need to. I mean, I'm not putting my parents in a home, for goodness sakes. And that you support them if they need it, and that kind of relationship should exist. On the other hand, men are to be beholden to their wives primarily, and secondarily to their children, and not to their fathers, not to their mothers. The wife has a greater claim on a man than his own father does once they get married. That is where the new identity is established. So in other systems, the woman's identity is typically erased in most, and she becomes kind of an addition to the male line. And those that track through female inheritance, you would think that, oh, well, then the same thing happens to the man. No. In that case, the girl is the object through which her father extends his household. So it goes back to the parents on each side in other systems, one way or another. If it's female line, then it's her own father, to whom her sons become the possible power players and things. And then on the other side, it is his father that he's beholden to. And there is not this identity. There's not a permanence in marriage. There's not a true union in marriage. It's not a union. It is a negotiated exchange. And that idea of negotiated exchange of goods, the woman's sexual access and reproductive capacity on one hand, for the consideration of support on the other, that is the fundamental legal basis for what is called marriage in translation in Islam, but is actually nikah, which means sexual intercourse, particularly allowable sexual intercourse.
Mhm.
Nikah is, strictly speaking, any sex, but what it means in contrast to zina, which is illegal sex, is legalized sex, allowable sex. So it's not about, like, maybe you love them, maybe you don't. It's not really about that. And it's not about your household identity. There's also the fact that in polygamy, you cannot have an identity as a family. You are an appurtenance of the husband, who establishes this satellite office stable to house the wife and children, but these are not his home properly. He does not share a home properly with a wife. Rather, he provides shelter for that which he has purchased. And he can provide shelter for other things which he purchases too, on an equal basis. It is not a shared home. And people just do not understand this. Even many modern Muslims do not understand this. Why do they not understand this? Because they've had enormous amounts of influence from the West. So I want to bring up a woman named, I think her name's Kesia. I think that's how you pronounce her name. It's Kecia, which is extremely confusing, Ali. And she is very much a reformer. She wants to redefine things and make excuses for why things can be so, and make excuses for why Muhammad's marriage to Aisha does not mean that today men can have intercourse with 8-year-olds. But she has a level of honesty as an academic to describe things as they were. So she, among her works is, it's a very influential work called Marriage and Slavery in Early Islam. And she says early Islam because she's mostly using the original sources. But in reality, it means any point before the 20th century Islam. That's what she means.
So real quick,
point.
before you get into that source, a couple people commenting on the different time for the stream. Professor Yaffel, either I'm asleep we're busy when these streams happen. And Tiger said that usually these streams are in the wee hours of the morning, trying out a variety of different times. Probably won't be streaming so much in the American evenings anymore because a lot of people are streaming at that time. And since
Yeah.
I'm free to stream whatever time, figure stream at a time where people are not already watching some other stream, or me taking viewers away from some other stream, however you want to look at that. So be on the lookout. Don't have a set schedule yet at this time, but definitely look for some streams earlier in the day.
Make sure to turn on your little bell icon, and you might possibly, perhaps, be notified, or maybe not, because
very true.
YouTube's good at YouTube, but that should help. So, reading her introduction. Well, here, I will actually start back a little bit farther, and then I'll jump ahead to that little part. Hopefully I don't click so I don't lose that place. But she begins by saying, while writing this book, I've had numerous opportunities to explain its subject. One of my less successful attempts occurred several years ago when an Algerian acquaintance inquired politely about my progress, adding, remind me what it's about? I answered that as writing about marriage, divorce, and the reciprocal but gender differentiated obligations of husbands and wives in 19th century Islamic jurisprudence. I was focusing, I added, on three major issues. First, diversity of opinion and early legal thought. Second, the influence of hierarchical social structures, including slave ownership, on jurists' visions of marriage. And third, the vital role of polemical exchange in the refinement of legal doctrine. As I finished this summary, we were joined by a colleague of his, another North African Muslim. Guess what? Said the first man enthusiastically, drawing on his new arrival into the conversation. She's writing a book on women's rights in Islam. And she says that this involved a series of miscommunications because, of course, the idea of women's rights as such is absurd for if you mean it in any sort of Western sense. But again, these are areas that had colonialism. They absorbed many things from their colonialist masters, and their universities are influenced by Western universities. Many of their top people, top academics go to school in Western universities, and they absorb this Western view of, women's rights and things of that nature that just does not fit in an Islamic context at all. But it has changed, and it's not even Western. It's also this Victorian. It's a very 19th century Western romantic view of womanhood that really is rooted only in the 19th century and a Western context that has come to influence the idea of how modern Muslims who want to defend all of the actual rules of ancient Islam, but how they articulate it publicly is very often in this romantic Victorian terminology that is completely foreign to an Islamic context. So, she notes that a vital change has taken place in the rhetoric associated with marriage. Modern Muslim authors, both clerics and lay people, glorify female domesticity and maternal virtue. The family unit they idealize with the mother housewife at its center. The family unit that they idealize with the mother housewife at its center differs sharply from early jurists' visions of the normative family. There was no view of this domesticity kind of angel in the house idea. Again, this is strictly a Western Victorian image because the image, hello AT Ministries, great to see you. The image of this angel in the house had developed from specific shifts in Western patterns of family that came about because of the professionalization and separation of work from home life. So if you're talking about the great history of the West, home and work were the same place for almost everyone for almost all of time. There was no office over here and home over here. There was no store over here and home over here. You lived where you worked. Your workshops were adjacent to your house. It was this often same roof, same building. Your store was typically same roof, same building. Your warehouse, if you were in Venice, your warehouse was on the bottom floor and you were on the upper floors. This separation between the workplace and the home place did not exist. And the segregation of working space from domestic space created this home wife that had never existed in the history of the world. There was no home wife of this sort. There was no domestic woman. And because this is not a natural phenomenon to have this strict separation. Now with our work from home, it's far more like historical patterns of living. We just need to get out more and like meet people rather than versus an office job. What there was before was there was work of the family that was centered around whatever role the man who was the primary breadwinner had, even if it was originally the woman's property. If it was, the man was often doing a lot of the physical sweat labor, because a lot of this was human power labor stuff. And the woman's role was very often support, but intrinsic support that was necessary for the continued running and operation of the unit. Without the woman, you have to make lots of accommodations and bring in other people and hire out work and do that sort of thing. Just like without the man, the woman would have to hire out a whole bunch of work. So it was a commercial unit. It was a productive unit that was centered around father and wife, and often working teenagers that were from other families and various other single people who were connected to it. But at the vast majority of businesses were what we would call small businesses centered around a married couple. So you take the work out of the house, and what's left is the support work for feeding and clothing and entertainment and all of those things. But a lot of the consumptive side, which is incredibly important, because women spent over 80% of the money that came into the household, because so much was spent on food, clothing, basic necessities in the past. So the women still had control of this consumptive side, but the consumption and the production got severed, and it was a new severance in the West. And that's really where a lot of the discontentment came with a lot of women, because they were severed from wider society for the first time ever, which was not a happy condition, right? I take care of, I homeschool. I take care of my family. I feed my family. I shop my family. I drive my family everywhere it feels like, right? But I also work. I can work from home because today that's an opportunity. Back then it wasn't. And so women felt more shut in, not because there's something most noble in productive activities where you get money back, but because you have a kind of social commerce with other people as well that you don't have when you don't have that. All of these things are it came from a particular time. In contrast to that, the Eastern woman, using Eastern here as a stand-in for Muslim, right, was confined, shut in, closed off, cut off from everything that was not social from the beginning. So that was always her life to a much, much, much greater extent. But in contact with the West, during this particular moment in time, that was a time of great wealth. It was a time of great success. It was the fact that people had more opportunities than they ever had before. But the other time, it had these negative consequences for women, and how it was this idea of this angel of the house, that, oh, the home is this refuge, the home is cut off, it's this separate place. This was invented in the West for a peculiar set of circumstances that only happened during a particular time. And then it was picked up and like dropped into the East and recontextualized there as if that had anything to do with the Eastern family or the Eastern family structure. And it doesn't. But in the same way that you'll find people today talking about the 50s housewife, as if this is like some sort of that this is tradition and this is the traditional standards, when really tradition was that there was no line between the economic and domestic, and that the household was a unit. There was no, do children belong at work? Of course children belong at work. Children are with their mothers. Their mothers are wherever their mothers are. Children are there. And now we shut out children. So we shut out women who are caring for children and all of this stuff. So they're taking this weird new purdah from the West that just happened because of various circumstances and trying to use it to describe something that's totally different, that's Eastern. And the irony is that many things in the West, in many ways in the West, while it was one of the most economically prosperous times and marked this inflection point for security and food availability and all sorts of sickness and kids surviving and women surviving childbirth, all these wonderful things. But at the same time, it also marked an inflection point where women were deprived of a lot socially because of these social changes, not because anybody was malicious. But this kind of difficulty in Western society was turned into this idealized thing in Eastern society. Oh, that's what we have. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. It's blissful. So this is how you get these modern Muslim authors glorifying female domesticity and maternal virtue. These are Western, Victorian, angel in the house ideals that were created to grapple with social realities of the 19th century. But notice it says that the family that they idealize with the mother housewife at its center differs sharply from early visions of the normative family. It's because it's not an Eastern idea. It's a Western 19th century idea. So, in these modern views, domestic duties of child rearing and housewifery serve as a rationale for support by the male husband, father, breadwinner. This is a Western idea from the 19th century.
So you're
Just want to
saying,
emphasize this.
so you're saying it's not an Islamic idea.
And that's what she's saying. She's saying it's not Islamic, and I'm agreeing, and I'm explaining that she's saying it's not anciently Islamic. Mm-hmm. I'm saying, yeah, it was stolen very recently from the West. In some respects, this model is likely to have accorded more fully with the experience of non-elite women throughout history. Domestic drudgery and the responsibility for childcare would have been the primary concerns for many, if not most women. Not exactly now. But anyway, drudgery. Goodness, does anybody call it farming drudgery? No, it's only domestic drudgery. It's never
that is
farming drudgery, you know?
That statement is quite outrageous there. Taking care of your kids, that's just horrible, crappy work that no one would want to do.
I think that domestic drudgery, she means like the cleaning and
okay, fine, but
laundry and stuff. But yeah.
Well, what about someone who's employed as a janitor? Right?
Yeah, for them it's not drudgery. For them it's a job, right? But anyway, yeah. But notice, notice this is called early Islamic law, but she says pre-modern Muslim legal writings. That means before colonialism. The pre-colonial Islamic writings presented a model of spousal relationship in which personal relations were peripheral, children were secondary. This is accurate. This separation derives at least partially from the way legal works were constructed into chapters of separate books addressing marriage and divorce. No, it's not just this. That's not just the way. It's how it was viewed. The relationship was viewed in this way. So, although the practice of the courts In the practice of the courts, other family duties might get a hearing. In the treatises, a wife's main duties to her husband were to obey him and be sexually available.
Mm-hmm.
What did Muhammad say? This.
Mm-hmm.
If a wife is cooking and if she leaves her cooking and it will burn the food and destroy the dinner for everyone, which is a pretty significant economic loss because you're spending and the idea in Muhammad's time, they were very poor. So probably 80% of their income was food. So imagine your 50% of your day's wages is in that dinner pot. If she leaves it, it will be burnt. And her husband says, I want to have sex now. What is her responsibility? According to
Her
Muhammad.
responsibility is to obey and provide her body. So
Yes, that is exactly it.
So it's both, right? It's both.
Yep.
If he asks, and dinner is neither of those things, right?
Correct.
Cooking dinner is neither of this.
So her responsibility to take care of the family and do right according to the family and take care of the children and make sure that all the animals and slaves and children and her husband himself are fed is very secondary to the fact that he wants sex right now at this moment and has impulse control. According to whom? Muhammad, that sex is what marriage is about. Sexual access. That's why it's called Nikah, because it's about sexual access. So hierarchy stood at the core of marriage. The jurist showed no hesitation in making analogies between wives and slaves, or between marriage and commercial transaction. In fact, their central notion about marriage was that the marriage contract granted a husband in exchange for payment of a dower, a bride price, a form of authority or dominion, milk. This is MLK, the same, not Martin Luther King, the same root from which king comes. He has kingship, ownership, also owner and king, both have the same root. So he has kingship and ownership. He has authority and dominion over his wife's sexual and usually reproductive capacity. The same term, milk, was used, although with its slightly different semantic range, for the ownership of a slave. It is about owning a woman sexually. It was the exclusive milk over a particular woman as a slave or a wife that rendered sexual access licit. You can have sex with her because you own her. You have paid for her.
Mm-hmm.
The implications of this basic idea and the ways in which it affected the jurist regulation of spousal rights while the marriage endured are the subject of this book.
Mm-hmm.
So it is about
Mary,
buying access.
You buy a field and you can plow it. You buy a woman and you can plow her.
And
it's straight from the Quran, right?
And Muhammad in a hadith said that women are captives with you. They're captives with you. Why? Because you have bought them and you have owned them. They are your slaves with slightly higher rights than other slaves. Ownership terminology and imagery may offend or bewilder. It would have been unexceptional to early Muslim audience for whom both life and law were saturated with slaves and slavery. So, of course, why would not women all be slaves? Muhammad abolished the other forms of marriage in which women were not slaves. There were other kinds of marriage. His marriage to Khadijah, was she a slave to whom she sold him her rights to her sex, and in return he provided housing and clothing and food? No. Whose house were they in? Did they live in Muhammad's house? Did Khadijah and Muhammad live in Muhammad's house?
No, they did not. She was independent might not be the right word, but she was a self-sufficient woman. She was probably the main source of income and money at that time of Muhammad's life.
Right. So he did not provide for her what would be necessary for an Islamic marriage to have taken place. Why?
Mhm.
Because this was a pre-Islamic form of marriage, and some of these forms of marriage, the women were not bought. And in the marriage between Muhammad and Khadija, you find that Muhammad paid her a mahr. Well, guess what? She gave him a slave. She canceled out that mahr.
Mhm.
So the exchange got canceled out, which meant that he did not purchase her. She was not indebted to him. And I am trying on the pronunciation, Jawad. It takes a while, but yes. It is not milk, it's milk.
Mhm.
Something close to that.
Hypostatic union says, but Muhammad was the first one to give women rights.
So it's so funny because you asked, okay, what rights did women gain under Islam? And you'll hear, first of all, oh, they used to kill their daughters. Well, here's the thing. One of Muhammad's main enemies was a man who had like 6 daughters and only 2 sons.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most evil men. How does he have 6 daughters if he killed all his daughters? You also find in the sources that the Hums, the pagan affiliation most closely associated with the Quraysh. So there had already been the history of Mecca probably began with the god Wad, who was called Allah. I have found a document in which Wad himself is called Allah. So Wad was called Allah,
Mm-hmm.
and he was later replaced by Hubal, who was a more northern god, and now Hubal was called Allah because Allah just means great God. So they switched out the identity of who the great God was. Now Hubal is Allah. And there was the cult around Hubal Allah that existed for a long time. And when campaigns started coming north and the Kinda kingdom collapsed and there was all this warfare, the Quraysh wanted to establish a religion that would be kind of a bit more of a rival and be able to stand more proudly next to their Jewish and Christian and Zoroastrian neighbors and kind of have a defensible, what they feel like is more socially defensible theology. And so they founded this group called the Hums. And so it was its own sect. It was this new religious sect. And in this religious sect, they took some beliefs of the Jews and Christians around them that canceled out older pagan practices that the Jews and Christians found most offensive. And number one among them is that they no longer allowed infanticide. So before Muhammad was probably even born, or at least before he married Khadija, the people there were Hums, which means that they did not practice female infanticide and had not for a long time. The other big thing that the Hums introduced that was social and not just theological is that they disallowed slave raiding. So the main way that people had gotten slaves was through these raids that they would do on other oases, mainly to get female slaves, to get women, because if there isn't a woman who wants to marry you with a different kind of marriage, and if you don't have the money for a regular purchase marriage, what do? You go and you grab and snatch up a woman, and now she's your slave wife. And now you have a woman to feed you and tend your animals and help you carry out the business of being a herder, right? And then have your children too. And so that was a major way of doing it. And of course, the Christians and the Jews found this incredibly offensive, that they would go and try to steal women and make them their rape wives, because you're not allowed to have rape wives in Christianity or Judaism. And so the Hums also canceled this out. Then what did Muhammad?
Mary, that's just because the Jews and Christians were affected by modern liberal values.
Yeah,
And that's why they
clearly.
didn't want to have sex slaves.
Yeah. But then Muhammad comes along and he confirms, oh, don't kill your daughters. But what does he do about the whole slave raiding slave wives thing?
Mhm.
He cancels it. He's like, no, get all the slaves you want. Kill the men, get the women, get all your rape slaves, get as many as you want.
Yeah, exactly. As hypostatic union says, he gave the women the right to become to be raided and become sex slaves for Muslim captors. That is a right they did not have before Muhammad.
Not among the Hums, because the Hums didn't do it. Other pagan groups who did not join the Hums still did it, but the Hums had not. Muhammad brought this back. He revived slave raiding that had been abolished. That was his major contribution. And women inherit now. Oh, excuse me. Khadija, what did her wealth come from? She was widowed twice. It came from her husband. She inherited not only from her husband, she also inherited from her father. Even though her father also had sons, she inherited some from her father and a lot from her husbands. So don't tell me that Muhammad brought female inheritance, because he absolutely did not.
Mm-hmm.
So he abolished the other forms of marriage. He abolished the form of marriage where women had the right to end the marriage. Like the form of marriage that he had with Khadija would have had the right to end that marriage.
So, Mary, I'm going to pause you for a second here, because we have the great God Wad, who thinks he's Allah and thinks he can tell us what is the actual truth about Islam, saying, notice the pattern. You're trying to strip out Islam from all the historical achievements, attributing to them to Christians, Jews, and pre-Islamic groups. Nice try. So Wad, here's how things work. If something happens before Islam and Islam continues it, that means it happened before Islam. Yep. If something happened before Islam and then Islam discontinues it, that means Islam is responsible for discontinuing it. If something happened before Islam or didn't happen before Islam and then starts happening in Islam, then it gets credit
Islam
for
did it. Yes. And here's the thing. I'm not the one who's making up this Hums group. This comes from Islamic sources. Islamic historians talked about the Hums and what they believed, that the Hums were the ones who stopped female infanticide. And the Hums were the ones that if you were Hums, you could not do female infanticide. Now, Muhammad's mother went off to Medina, so maybe she practiced female infanticide while she was at Medina, because Medina was not a Hums city. There were Hums tribes, and there were the Tamim were a Hums tribe. The Medinan tribes were not Hums. Taif, the people in Taif were not Hums. So there were Hums tribes and there were non-Hums tribes. And the Hums tribes abolished slave raiding and abolished female infanticide, and were trying to influence the other pagan tribes into joining them and becoming Hums. The other third thing that was really important is that they established the Umrah. They invented it rather than just the Hajj. The Hajj was a pagan practice. And during the Hajj, the part of the Hajj where you run out toward Taif and then you camp out for no reason and come back, originally you went all the way to a Taif and you worshiped the goddess there, because it was part of a bigger circuit of various pagan sites. So first you went to the pagan site of Allahu Baal, and then you went to the pagan site of Alat, and then you went to these other various pagan sites. And most of these sites are recoverable, what pagan places they were that people were traveling to. And if you joined the Hums, you said that the main God, the most important God, more important than any other God, was Allah. And one of your cries was Allahu Akbar, because what does it mean? It means that Allah is greater. Why does it mean Allah is greater? Because there was already a chant that was Allah to Kabir. So Allah is great, and your response is Allah is greater. You're the Hums. Your Allah is greater even than the great goddess Alat. So you still recognize that she exists, but you say that you are You have a strong pantheon with the most important god is Allah, and the most important site is the Kaaba, and the other goddesses and other gods are far less important. That is the point. And so what the Hums were trying to do is create their own and not monotheistic, obviously, because they still recognize that these other gods in their pantheon existed, but this semi pseudo kind of monotheistic religion that was centered on Mecca, and that's why they invented the Umrah, where you only went to the Kaaba and you didn't go to the other pagan sites. So you were one of these special groups because you could do a pilgrimage that just went to the Kaaba because the Kaaba is so super important. So yeah, they were aping the Jews and the Christians, and Muhammad continued some of that and discontinued other parts of it. So
Allah is in the chat, everyone.
Mhm.
Allah says that Lot is doing well. She went to university as a guy in good grades, with Lilith being the professor.
And now notice that the snake is actually accurate, because what was the symbol of the original god of the Kaaba? Wad.
A snake.
Yes, it was a snake.
Just like the little snake in the chat here.
Yeah. So he was a snake. He also had a moon, because all high gods got the moon symbol, but he was snake and moon were his symbols. So.
So let me take one of these super chats while we're paused from Rick Newton.
They give a loan to Allah. What is the reward? The reward in this life is that the money will come back double. You give 100, 200 will come back. Sooner or later. Believe me, all money that is given for the sake of Allah, it comes back. And I'm sure that all of you have experience.
Money given to reasoned answers comes back sooner or later.
And you guys can still just go to any of the book. I mean, for heaven's sake, we have a Deobandi here in the chat with Jawad as a Deobandi. I've read Heavenly Ornaments. Don't give me this silliness about women and Islam. I've read Heavenly Ornaments, which is the Deobandi Sharia manual for women that tells all about what you owe and what you are owed and what the idea of marriage is about. And all the Sharia manuals, it's still about this, because it always has been. And that's the Islamic centering of marriage, is about exchange of sex. So note that slavery was more than an occasion.
Hey, Mary, you never let me read this super chat.
Oh,
you just,
sorry.
interrupted me.
Yes, I did.
Rick Newton says, always appreciate Thad and Mary kicking Muslim butt by reading the Quran and Hadith. History doesn't lie. Praise be to Jesus. Amen to that. And Cargo says it's a money back guarantee. You donate and you get back double, guaranteed. So it's a double your money back guarantee, in fact.
Yep. All right. Slavery was more than an occasional for technical virtuosity in the details of marriage law. So they talked about slavery in relation to marriage, not because they were showing off how smart they were and how they could see the parallels, right? It was central to the jurist's conceptual world. So marriage in Islamic law is centered on the idea of ownership and slavery. In particular, it affected how marriage and gender were thought about. There was a vital relationship between enslavement and femaleness as legal disabilities. And who introduced complete female disability to society? That would be Muhammad. Before Muhammad, women could be in control of their own finances. But Muhammad declared that they were stupid, that they had half the brain of man, they were defective in intelligence, and that as essentially naturally mentally retarded, they do the weak in intellect. Like, there is a verse about how you when you examine the orphans and check their intellects, that the jurists, the tafsir note that all women cannot possibly pass the intellectual capacity test. They are not capable. Women cannot be given over their own possessions or inheritance to manage because they are eternally owned by someone because of their mental incapacity. So there is a vital relationship between enslavement and femaleness as legal disabilities, and between slave ownership and marriage as legal institutions. Why? Because Muhammad said that women can't ever manage themselves. The best that women ever get is once they have been divorced once, they can say yes or no to their own marriages. So after you get divorced one time, before you get divorced the first time, all you can do is throw the biggest fit possible and possibly get annulled. But it has to be like a huge fit. And if it's your own father and all kinds of other legal specifications, you know, the man checks all the boxes and he's your dad, you won't have a choice. But if you are very lucky, you can possibly object to a marriage maybe before you're married once. And once you're divorced the first time, you can actually object to future marriages. And there you go. That is your control over yourself. And that's as far as you get. Mm-hmm. Slaves and women were overlapping categories of legally inferior persons constructed against one another and in relation to one another. Sometimes identified, meaning sometimes they're saying that they are the same, sometimes distinguished. So sometimes wives had privileges over slaves, for instance. Slavery was frequently analogized to marriage. Both were forms of control or dominion exercised by one person over another. The contracting of marriage was parallel to the purchasing of a slave. Why? Because you're exchanging money for access to a person's body. Divorce is parallel to freeing a slave. Marriage and slavery and that's why women had more rights after they are divorced than they ever had before. They can object to new marriages way more easily.
Mm-hmm. So we have a breaking response from Mohammed Hijab. It's because women are pusillanimous ultra-crepidarians.
There you go. That would be it.
And that's like very accurate too, right? Like he would definitely say something like that. Just say a bunch of words and hope you think that he said something intelligent.
Yep. So slave concubinage helped define marriage both by comparison and contrast. For example, in slave concubinage, you can sell the woman off to someone else with absolutely no freedom at all for that slave. In contrast, you can't just hand your wife over to somebody else for him to have sex with. And slave concubinage, if you're following the Sunnah of Umar, which the Sunni do, the Sunni recognize the Sunnah of the first three Khalifa, then you can't sell off slave concubine once she's given birth to a child for you. But during the time of Muhammad, you did. So the Shia still do it because they don't follow the examples of the Sunnis, only the examples of the Imams. And it's really funny because people in Sunnism act like this treatment of the Shia Imams is special. It's like, no, there are a number of laws that you practice the way you do because it comes from Abu Bakr or Umar. So you are absolutely doing the same thing they are in terms of expanding the Sunnah to the successors of Muhammad.
Well, and not only that, I mean, they may not visit the graves of their deceased leaders, but they certainly put
except
their
Muhammad.
leaders, right, except Muhammad. They certainly put their leaders on a pedestal that one could say borders on worship, in fact.
Oh, well, Sufis, even Sunni Sufis, absolutely visit graves, touch graves, expect graves to work miracles, get relics, things like that. That Sufis do all of those things. But anyway, to discuss marriage in the pre-modern period, not early, pre-modern, everyone, pre-modern, everyone, pre-colonial period, without reference to slavery would fundamentally distort the jurist's way of thinking. One was bound up with another, even more so in legal than actual practice. So, and even more so in illegal thinking than actual practice, because in actual practice you might have a fondness for your wife and you might treat her with consideration, and if she says she has a headache, you might not beat her, right?
Right. You might be better than what the law allows. I mean, the law doesn't require you to beat your wife. It just allows you to beat your wife. It's so funny though, because the author of this text, she's saying all this like as a way to try to say, well, in modern times, we don't have to do this anymore. But in fact, what she's really saying is that throughout Islamic history, women were treated as slaves. And that's how all these rulings came down to us, because they were slaves. And her says, but they're not slaves anymore, so we don't have to do this anymore.
Yeah, basically that it now that there isn't slavery, doesn't permeate society, we don't need to do any of this. And she is very, very, very much a reformer here. Let's see, there's one other chapter that I wanted to catch in here. It's been a few years since I've read this, so I knew that was
Pat's leather strap says, take the like button to a cheap hotel.
Yeah.
I cannot endorse that. But Mohammed Hijab would, as long as you have a Nikah contract first. So
yep. And so the question is, how can he, if what it is that you're buying her for a certain consideration, meaning that you need to provide for her food, clothing, housing, and a stipend for they would call it like, what is it called? Oil money, basically for your lighting and your basic other necessities and that sort of thing. Here's what's important. You are not required to do things like pay for her doctor's care. So if she gets sick, she has to pay for that herself. It's not only what you pay for, but also what you don't. You do not have to pay for a doctor. You can, if you as a man decide to call a doctor, you can't stick her with the bill, but you can just choose not to call a doctor for her. And she needs to pay for it for herself from that small sum that she was given at the beginning as payment for intercourse for the rest of her life. So she'd better be really careful with it. She can pay for it out of that. But for stuff that she has squirreled away from what you have given her, she can pay for it out of that. So it's so foreign, and the companionate view, even in the slightly goofy angel in the house view, the domestic housewife who, he's had such a hard day out in the real world, and here you are in this carefully insulated little box so you can make him happy by dressing up and putting a smile on your face. I mean, yeah, you don't come to your spouse immediately with whining and complaining. That's unpleasant for anyone. Like when your spouse comes home, I don't care where they came home from. No one wants to just get a litany of all the things that went wrong that day. When you meet up with your spouse, people want to feel welcome. So you speak to each other with care and consideration, and then you bring up the difficulties that you've had or the concerns that you have, and you support one another, right? But this whole angel in the house nonsense and this sphere of perfection that you are in this special bubble that away from the cares of the world kind of thing. That sort of thing becoming transported into, which was always a pretty heavy fiction, but being transported into the Islamic world where it is only about ownership. It's only about control. It's only about the duties and the exchange of values. If a woman is to nurse the child that she bore to a man, she needs to be compensated. She has no duty to her child. There's no concept of a motherly duty as such in Islamic law. So all of this, the female domesticity, where's the domesticity in saying, I will let your son starve to death unless you pay me? I cannot imagine doing that to even the most unwanted child, right? That is your baby. It's your baby. That is your baby, but that's not how it is seen in Islam. Muhammad's own mother was going to let him starve to death, never fed him, because he was born 4 years after she last had sex with his dad. And so his that family obviously knew it wasn't their kid, didn't believe it was their kid, although they had a very shaky grasp on biology and how long pregnancy should last. They were very dubious about her claims that it was Abdullah's child, and so they would not pay her. And eventually they sent a slave to nurse him and paid another woman to feed him. But Amina was going to let him die. And no one has ever said a word against her. Not only because they tried to avoid talking about it, but because it's not wrong.
That's just because they didn't know about the time traveling uterus. That's all. Hypostatic Union says, this all reminds me of wildlife documentaries.
Which is something you can't fathom.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they're talking about, the milk ideology, the dominion, ownership, kingship, the relationship between men and women. And so they're talking about it being control, authority, even prerogative, rather than ownership as a commodity property in some cases. But that's milk al Raja. I'm not getting the Hamza in there, but they still have dominion over both wife and slave, and they have possession and ownership of both. They just, what linguistic overlap initiates, Kessia writes, analogy completes. Analogy occupies the center of developing juridical discourse on marriage and slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And it just continues about what is about, what matters. There's the situation of a female married slave who is sold to another owner. Marriage there trumped property rights, because you could have a married slave and then a man owns his wife more than her master owns a slave, for example. Marriage remains intact. Her husband retains his power of divorce. The new owner does not gain sexual rights. But a husband coming to his own enslaved wife pitted marriage and enslavement against one another with a different outcome. The marriage was dissolved and the commercial ownership tie persisted. If the parties' genders were reversed and a woman came to her own enslaved husband, the situation would shift dramatically, as the male prerogative to make his ex-wife his concubine did not apply in the other direction. So it's all about ownership.
We need to help out Allah here. Allah says, I wasn't listening. What the hell is 4 years of pregnancy?
Okay, awesome. This is actually my other main topic. So my first topic was about how women are utterly owned by men. My second topic was about the way in which this relationship should not, just because it is extreme and women are owned by men. Every woman is owned by a man. She has a guardian. She has an owner who has dominion on her. That doesn't mean that women were just sitting there in their houses, especially since if they go out, they're supposed to be covered up. So what does that mean? If you see someone walking down the street, guess what? You don't know. You don't know who that is. You don't know what she's doing. That could be your mom going to bang the plumber next door. You don't know who it is. And women know that you don't know who it is. So
but before you get into that, one, I wanted to say something I thought I would never say in my life. Allah makes a good point here. The idea of a housewife is modern women were part of household economy, milking cows, feeding animals, making yarn, making clothes, and fixing things, and tending to the garden.
Yep.
So Allah is right on there. But can you explain to Allah the specific reference to 4-year pregnancy?
First of all, Muhammad himself, his mom married his dad at the same time that his mom's cousin married his granddad. Yeah, they're all related anyway, so it's all one big old incestuous family. But they married on the same day.
Mhm.
Muhammad's father died almost immediately after the marriage. Muhammad's mother's cousin gave birth to her first child by Muhammad's grandfather 4 years before Muhammad himself was born. So this means that Muhammad's dad was dead for at least 4 years before Muhammad's mother gave birth.
Mhm.
And at this time, women were a bunch of different types of marriage. I personally believe that Muhammad's mom, because Muhammad was known in Medina. He wasn't a complete stranger to Medina. He hadn't been there for a long time, but he was still known there. And it was known that his mom died as she was coming from Medina back towards Mecca. So I believe that the time that after Muhammad's mother, after her husband died, moved to Medina, where business was better for travelers' wives. And at that time, a traveler's wife was a woman who would marry multiple men and would act as their wives whenever they were in town, and then just have the household when they're not in town. So a man would come through, visit his town wife, and go off with the perfect knowledge that she had 5 or 6 or 8 other town husbands who also made use of her as they came through. But I believe that Muhammad's father was his most wealthy, her most wealthy attachment, and so she assigned paternity to Muhammad's father and tried to get the Quraysh to pay for it. She came back to Mecca to give birth and claimed that Abdullah was Muhammad's dad, and Muhammad's grandfather wasn't having any of it. Did not believe it at all. We know this because he didn't send anyone to nurse the baby, and Amina refused to nurse Muhammad because you had the right, if you were nursing, to refuse to nurse a child unless the child's father gave you money, because you could commit infanticide, you could starve your baby, you could bury your baby in the hole that you buried your afterbirth in, unless you were Huns, which is how the girls were buried and whatever boys they chose not to keep too. So she wouldn't feed him, and little baby Muhammad was here dying, and Muhammad's uncle Abu Lahab was so certain that it was his half-brother's son, that he sent his slave, who had milk at the time, to go and wet nurse Muhammad and save his life. Because his son had taken that action, the father, Muhammad's grandfather, was now forced into action, into performing a legal ceremony where they stood in front of Hubal and tossed sticks to determine whether or not Hubal recognized the child as a paternity test. This paternity test is documented in Ibn Ishaq, and so is the fact that the grandfather took Muhammad to the Kaaba and stood in front of Hubal and then spoke to Allah, because they're the same person. And so what was he doing with this baby in front of Allah? Well, Ibn Ishaq just told us that that's how they did paternity tests. So they did a paternity test, and the paternity test turned up positive, that it was truly Abdullah's son. The pagan god let us know that's Abdullah's son after the years of,
You can't argue with Hubal.
Yeah,
that guy knows what he's talking about.
No, he definitely knows what he's talking about. He's the god of paternity tests. So it came out positive, so he got ascribed to it. But I don't think that Abd al-Muttalib, his grandfather, ever really believed it, because what he did is he paid for a foster mother and still refused to give Amina any money for caring for him, and would rather pay money to a complete stranger to raise Muhammad, which she did for 4 years. Usually you only nurse kids for 2 years in that culture max. But he kept paying her because he didn't want to send any support money to Amina. Also did not want to have this child in his household even after he was weaned. So for 4 years, he was with the foster mom. The foster mom decided he was possessed by demons, partly because of some sort of event that she saw, but also probably because of the big old mole on his back. Marks like that were considered jinn marks, demon marks. So the seal of the prophets would have been viewed by everyone at that time as being a mark of being touched by jinn in a bad way. And so she found Amina, ditched him, and took off because she's like, I'm done with this. You can't pay me anymore to keep this demon child. And so Amina had him for the next 2 years, and she was probably realizing that she was really sickly and wanted to dump him back off with his grandfather and try to recover maybe, or before she died or whatever. And she died on the way back to Mecca. So those were the 2 years that Muhammad spent in Medina, and why people in Medina knew about him. But there's this silly thing that people say that, oh, Amina was visiting her relatives. What in Medina? What relatives did she have in Medina? She had no blood relatives in Medina. She was going there because you can make money as a traveler's wife there, much better than Mecca, which is off the beaten path. And so she had no other reason to be there. The only relations that she had is that she had a stepmother who briefly married her father before her father died, who had brothers who lived in Medina. That would not be a blood relation that you would want to your stepmom's brothers are not blood relations to you, especially if they only married your dad when you were like 12 or 13, and then your dad died very soon after. And like, what relation would you have to them? No relations there. She didn't know anybody there, so she's there to be a traveler's wife. So that was her story in the background.
Una says, according to Hubal, you are the father.
Whoa.
Let me take one of the super chats from AT Ministries.
O son of Adam, spend. I will spend on you. Give, then I will give you. It's difficult because you know what? These are my last few. As it is, the price is going up, the rand is going down, this is happening. Excuses. Those are excuses. You give and watch what Allah does.
I expecting to hear back what Allah does for you. AT Ministries says, hi, Mary. And Mary saw this at the time and said hi back.
Yep.
How's the writing going?
It's going pretty well. I've got even a slow week is still about 10,000 words in the bag one way or another. So I just have a lot to do. So yeah, I write ridiculous amounts in a year.
And Hypostatic Yoon says, I'm glad you guys are streaming more often, and you can thank Lizzie Baby and you can thank Danae King for that. So thank you, Lizzie and Danae, for allowing me to stream more often and allowing Hypostatic this pleasure. And finally, one more from Hussein says, Mohammed Hijab said he's innocent. He said he's innocent. I mean, who is to doubt him about that?
What's really funny is he says he's innocent by saying he doesn't have any idea about this woman, then saying that this woman is a stalker, and then releasing things that indicates that the woman reluctantly agreed to a secret marriage, those terms not having been defined ahead of time. So basically everything she says about the marriage is true by what Muhammad has shared so far, except that Mohammed Hijab was like, I never promised to give her a house. Definitely wasn't in the contract.
And he may well be innocent, Islamically speaking. You know, that's a point of debate. It depends on the exact circumstances, but the general outline doesn't necessarily mean that he's Islamically guilty, although he's flat out denying that it happened, which of course is not realistic.
While releasing things that show that it probably did, which is just crazy.
Well, you know, he's not known for his incredible intelligence. After all, he prepared for weeks, months perhaps, to debate David Wood. And he's like, I knew this is the argument you were going to give. I'm now going to agree with you and shout it really loud about how stupid you are, and all the Muslims are going to jump for joy. Right? So this is hijab we're talking about here. And I mean, and to his credit, he was correct. All the Muslims think that he dominated that debate by agreeing with David's points, but saying them much louder.
Yep. So anyway, partly because Muhammad himself, was born 4 years after his dad died, it's awfully hard to say that pregnancy should be 9 months long. And I thought that this was just, there are sources, Islamic sources, that just draw the conclusion flat out that he was born 4 years later. And I thought at first that this was probably just bad math, because there's bad birth math all over the Islamic sources, but there's so much other information that confirms the fact that he was born years after his mother possibly could have had intercourse with his dad, that I'm certain that it's true. And I'm certain that this was a major factor behind the early Islamic legal views on the duration of pregnancy. But you also have to understand that there is a strong desire in Islamic law for all that men own women and everything else to avoid drama, to avoid mama drama. Just don't upset the boat. Don't upset people. Keep your mouth shut. Just keep going like everything's good. Pretend that everything is very above board. Pretend that everyone is being righteous, because righteousness in Islam is all about appearances. One of Allah's names is the eraser of sins. And what he does is that he conceals sins in this world. And then if you get away with a sin that's been concealed in this world, it gets erased in the next. So it's very important to keep sins hidden, hide the sins, act like they're fine, and they actually will become fine, and Allah will make them fine. So don't rock the boat. Don't invent sins by exposing sins. And this is a big reason why this woman's going to get all kinds of blowback, because in the Islamic system, a person who reveals sins is wrong. He is guilty. He is messed up. But this also extends to men who might claim that children are not theirs, instead that belong to their legal wives. For example, if you have been in the same city such that it was possible that you could have gone to a hotel room and had intercourse with a woman, or you could have your wife, or you could have visited your wife's house, even if you have no memory of it and believe it did not happen, you should not say that your wife's child is not yours. So unless you are on deployment and she has the baby, and within years after you're on deployment.
At least 4, right?
At least four, right? Right? Otherwise, it is your baby. It is your child. Shut up. DNA does not count. Video evidence does not count, because that's not 4 witnesses. That is your legal child. And remember, these women are all dressing up looking exactly the same. Other men in the really strict cultures, other men don't even know what their faces look like. So how can anyone possibly accuse a woman of adultery if he has seen her completely naked, because there's no other context in which he has seen her face? So women could conduct affairs without any kind of control or compunction. And so many of the sources blatantly say that they did, that this was normalized, that because women were so artificially circumscribed in what they could do, their minds were consumed with love affairs, and who's carrying on a love affair with whom, and how one could carry on a love affair, and which man is hot, and which man can you get the attention of, and which friend can you scheme with to have a place to encounter this man for intercourse. That this was the entire experience of the average locked up woman, because she had nothing else to think about, nothing else to do. It's also And also that they get trained upon thinking this way from very, very young ages, because girls are sitting next to their mothers as they themselves are discussing these things, and that their language and their topics of conversation are very crass and graphic and all about these kinds of things. And even their songs are about these sorts of things. Again, if you have read the original Arabian 1001 Arabian Nights, those are the kinds of stories that women would tell one another, even in fiction. Even the fiction were graphic, and that's just how the society was, because they had nothing else. Their lives were that they were owned for their sex, which was the only thing that was valuable about them. So what are they going to value in themselves? So to keep the boat level, not rock the boat, to keep the society working, to continue to have this appearance of morality, these very extreme ideas were adopted about beyond 4 years in some cases, about how long a child might be gestated. So
You just never know. You just
now-
never know.
in contemporary Sunni fiqh or religious law, most experts strive to demonstrate that classical jurisprudence and modern medicine are perfectly compatible. Because of course you have the Sunni idea of this miracle of the Quran, the scientific miracles, right?
Yeah, that really holds up to scrutiny there, right? That the jurisprudence, which says that women can be pregnant for at least 4 years, possibly more. I think there's opinions up to 6 years on that. That's perfectly compatible with modern medicine, which says that normal pregnancy is 9 months maximum, like in like the longest documented ever case, maybe 12. So there you go. Perfectly compatible.
Despite the fact that the former contemplates gestational periods far longer than 9 months. But because they're claiming that they're trying to shovel a lot of these old rulings under the rug, sweep them under the rug because they're embarrassing now, that they are trying to shorten the legal duration of pregnancy, they're trying to legitimize the shortening of legal duration of pregnancy that had already taken place in the family codes of most Muslim majority countries in defiance of actual Islamic law, in order to adapt the Islamic jurisprudence to be so that they're based on modern medical knowledge. So they're trying to change. A lot of people are trying to change Islamic law to accommodate science so that they can pretend that they are compatible.
Well, I think they got this backwards, Mary. I think what they should be saying is
Not science. To hell with science.
just sticking with what they know to be true from Allah, that you can be pregnant for 4 years.
But notice the adoption of the medical duration of pregnancy affects such extremely sensitive issues like the criminalization of non-marital sexual intercourse and the denial of paternal filiation of the resulting offspring, as long as the latter two fields are not revised accordingly. Contemporary fiqh and legislation on the matter will seem flawed, since their implementation leaves women and their children deprived from legal protections they used to have under the corresponding classical jurisprudence in the pre-modern period. Basically, before pre-modern eras, women who are currently married or previously married could run around for years having sex with absolutely anyone and have absolutely no legal repercussions because any of their kids, whoops, nice. It's falling. Well, we'll just make it go. There we go. We'll be considered to, I'm just green now. We'll be considered to have, I can change my image. Look at that. Let's select a local image and we'll have streaming. I'll
While you're doing that,
look at that.
I do have a second opinion here.
This is something that becomes biologically
Oh, I didn't play it long enough. I got to change the duration there. Just he said it's something that's not biological. The impossible is how it finishes.
Yeah, it just didn't want to play. There we go. I'm back in my church now. Oh well. I'll just have green and I'll look very strange, but That's fine. That's fine. I've been struggling with this since it was moved and one of my children pulled it down. Okay, so anyway, in classical Islamic jurisprudence, the duration of pregnancy is relevant to determine paternal filiation. The time a repudiated or widowed woman must wait before marrying, maintenance and inheritance right, all sorts of things. Oh, by the way, if you get pregnant 5 years out, 3 years after you got divorced and then you give birth, you could still claim child support from your ex-husband in classical jurisprudence.
I mean, that's very strange because, Allah says you just got to wait 3 months, but I guess the jurists know better.
Yeah.
Breaking news here. Your background fell down because you disrespected Allah and he is punishing you.
Sounds about right. So the agreed upon minimum duration of pregnancy is 6 months, and the maximum length was subject to strong disagreement. And by the way, the minimum duration was 6 months, but not strictly 6 months, meaning that if you gave birth really early and your husband believed that the child was his and the child's, really small and very weak, the father can still claim an even earlier birth, as did happen sometimes. Very, very rarely, because children generally didn't survive such premature births back then. But this is about when the husband cannot deny the child. It's not about when the husband must deny the child, to be clear. But the maximum was heavily disputed. So they span from 2 to 7 or even 10 years. And there were minority of groups who said that there was a view that the pregnancy should be considered according to a tested experience and the observation of nature. However, tested experience included Islamic scholars arguing for the excellent moral character of women who gave birth after 6 years or 4 years or 3 years. Now, keep in mind that the entire science of isnad is based on what?
Reliability of the people's testimony.
Right. So the people have to have been able to physically meet, but also they must have reputations of being excellent moral people who would not lie. The same people who determine whether or not an isnad was solid were the people who said that women can be pregnant for 10 years because a really virtuous woman gave birth after 10 years after her husband died. To be clear, this is the level of judgment that these people have on moral characters. Would you believe anything that these people told you about the moral character's reliability of anyone? Shouldn't?
I mean, it certainly casts into doubt. I mean, obviously someone can have poor moral character and still tell the truth or still accurately remember the past. It's not even a very good criteria to begin with, frankly, because just because someone is, let's say for the sake of argument, someone is actually very honest, that doesn't mean they can't be mistaken or misremember. And just because someone's dishonest doesn't mean they couldn't have a superior memory. So it's kind of a really stupid criteria to begin with.
And also,
it's what you get in Islam.
But the idea is that they're honest, so they would only report what they know to accurately remember. But just granting that, it's terrible criteria. Granting that, these people had no idea who has a good moral character or not. Because these women who are getting pregnant from their affairs and having affair babies are considered to be such strong evidence that they extend the official legal principles about pregnancy length. So they conceptualize extended pregnancies in connection with the belief that a child may fall asleep in its mother's womb and remain so for an indefinite period of time until it is awakened by sudden traumatic experience in the life of the mother, the return of her menstrual blood, or sexual intercourse. So
Well, I
then,
think they may have a point there, because that's just very similar to the very true story of some boys who slept for hundreds of years in a cave. So
yeah,
you just
yep,
never know, right? You may go to
yep,
sleep one day and then wake up 100 years later, or as a baby, you fall asleep in the womb and wake up 4 years later and start developing again.
yep. The child may be then born or fall asleep again for another indefinite period of time. Of course, in Islam, what happens when you're asleep? Allah takes your soul out of yourself. So I don't think that they have the concept that all the processes of lifelike development and aging even happen while you're asleep, because of this belief that you are no longer ensouled when you are sleeping. Anyway, the child may be born, may fall asleep for another indefinite period of time. So there are manuals of fatwas that show the admission of extended legal durations was rather effective to protect widowed, repudiated, and deserted women against an accusation of adultery or fornication, actually. Which, I mean, yes, it protected them from accurate accusations. But when patrimonial rights like maintenance and the inheritance rights of the unborn were at stake, they weren't always applied literally. So you can't accuse a woman of zina, but maybe you can like not pay her off.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mick has a interesting observation here. I think you can get a jinn condom in Islam if the jinn decides to wrap himself around your man bits. So all you have to do is not say the magic words, and then you can get a jinn. Although I think that the idea isn't just that the jinn wraps himself around you, but then effectively the jinn is the one impregnating your wife.
yes, that every man has a bit of jinn in his soul. Also because Adam and Eve ate the son of Satan as well. But that's another reason, because the jinn is having intercourse with your wife, so you have jinn babies. And there's some that actually Aisha taught that you could have a half jinn baby. Like literally, some people are half jinn.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, if you can be raped by a jinn, you'd think you could have a half jinn baby. So
Yeah.
there you go. So Songs of Relief does have a real question here. How much did people know about other people's menstrual cycles back then? If a woman's menstrual cycle returned, then later got pregnant and had a baby, shouldn't they have known? Shouldn't it have been clear?
Well, first of all, the woman is not going to tell people when she's menstruating. She's just not going to like go out and tell folks, oh yeah, I have a menstrual cycle is back. That was considered generally a private matter between a husband and wife and was not really talked about. And then there's also the possibility of threatened miscarriage, which can be mistaken for that. But she's keeping her mouth shut. She's not telling people that she's had normal cycles and that stopped because she got pregnant by a lover and now she's had a baby. But notice it says here that when a woman gets divorced and she claims to still be pregnant after 1 or 2 years, she might get pressed upon to give up her claim or undergo a physical examination to see whether or not she's pregnant. They could actually do physical examinations and determine pregnancy by like the Middle Ages, because the cervix closes and is hard in pregnancy, and you can tell the difference between a pregnant cervix and a non-pregnant cervix. But the woman could, if she had knowledge of the admitted maximum limits, she could throw a fit and basically say, you can't press me into doing that, and then still get basically alimony for however many years before going, guess I had a miscarriage. Oh well. But notice that this is specifically heavily for maintenance and inheritance rights of the unborn. So basically getting paid when there isn't a baby who's shown up yet. So if the baby shows up, you and the baby are both protected. But if you're falsely claiming a pregnancy that does not exist, you can't extort this indefinitely. And by 2 years at the most, people are going to be pushing the idea that you're just lying and that you aren't pregnant at all. All right. So A lot of countries have changed to make the legal duration the same as medical science, disagreeing with Islamic doctrine. And that means that the doctrine of the sleeping fetus could no longer be a valid defense to adultery in a lot of places.
So Jeremy says, gin, wieners, cervix. This is a naughty talk channel.
Yeah.
Well, when you talk about Islam, you have to talk about naughty stuff because the two go hand in hand. So there you go.
So notice, after the arrival of Western knowledge, scientific knowledge, the doctrine of sleeping fetus created a dichotomy between physiology and the law that could no longer be admitted without creating intolerable
ate the apple?
intellectual dissonance. Now, what you do is you say, to hell with science, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Not science. To hell with science.
clinging to the old legal opinions about extended pregnancies thus puts religious scholars at risk of looking ridiculous and losing their credibility. So there's all this tension, et cetera, et cetera. But let's see what the actual historical opinions were. Let me find. You can take another one while I'm finding.
Yep, I was going to say, while you're grabbing that, I'll get a super chat. This one from Rick Newton.
Brothers and sisters, why to lose this great opportunity? Remember, when the person is on his deathbed, the last minute, he will ask Allah Jalla wa'ala to be delayed for 1 second to do what? Not to pray, not to do other things, but to give sadaqah. Because sadaqah, you can give it just like this, in 1 second.
Muhammad gave women rights to shut up and put out. He is the best example of mankind.
We're proud of that.
Although Muhammad needs cooling right now. Indeed, indeed. The question here from Daniel. How can you keep a person fixated in topic if they jump from topic to topic?
Don't
answer the question. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, don't answer. Don't allow them to change the subject. Just be like, we're not talking about that. We can talk about that after we finish this topic, which means you admitting that you're wrong. But until then, this is the topic we're discussing.
Yep.
So
and if you're doing it with people kind of face to face, you go, or where you're trying not to be as confrontational, you just go, yeah, you really don't want to talk about this, do you? Why don't you want to talk about this? Why don't we talk about this thing? This is, especially if they're the ones who brought it up, because a lot of times they bring it up. They get embarrassed when they get an answer because they don't realize it has an answer, and then they want to jump to something else. And I just really want to make them tackle the thing because a lot of times they aren't looking for answers. They just think that they're going to defeat you. We will kill them. We'll destroy them. And then they discover that they are actually humiliated, and they want to take their minds away from it as fast as possible. And the most important thing is to keep their minds on it. So,
hey, speaking of people who can't stick to the topic, we have a new Muslim on the site whose name is Incredible Site, and he wants to ask questions about David Wood and others. I thought we were talking about Islamic marriage here. Are you so embarrassed by the topic of Islamic marriage that you refuse to discuss it and then make pathetic attempts to insult me? Hey, Incredible Site, why do you hate Islamic marriage? What's your problem?
Yeah, why don't you want to talk about this? And of course,
get on topic or get lost. Of
course, David tried to kill his father. He's a sociopath and was not a Christian. Why were there Islamic women who were Muslim and beat people with a tent pole and kill each other? One of Muhammad's companions beat another woman with a tent pole to death. Mm-hmm. Why were Islamic women murdering each other who are companions of Muhammad? Why are there companions of Muhammad who murder other Muslims?
Yeah, so Incredible Sight, since you wanted to bring this up, yes, David Wood did try to murder his dad. And you know how you know that? Because he told you. You know where he told you? In his testimony video. Was that before or after he became a Christian? Before he was a Christian, he wanted to murder people. He wanted to commit crimes. He wanted to destroy the world. And then he became a Christian and all that stopped. And this is your evidence to not trust David Wood and Christianity. Is because Christianity makes you stop being a murdering sociopath. Okay, good argument. Good argument. Now, get on topic or get lost. We are discussing Islamic marriage. We are not discussing whatever random crap you want to jump to. We entertain one of your stupid comments. That will be the only one.
Yep. We are talking about Islamic marriage. Now, I know that you love having sex with little children and so have to lie about other people. So just say, I think sex with little kids is great. Just say that. Just say that sex with little kids is the sunnah of my prophet, and I follow it and defend it. And I wish that the whole world supported sex with small children, because that is what you are arguing for in the chat right now. Just say it. Quit being a coward. So when Muhammad did his conquest, he didn't have to fight. People loved him. Yes, you're going in timeout. So,
well, I hadn't warned him yet. Don't put him in timeout.
Oh, okay. Well, you
can
take him back out again.
Whatever.
I already have,
whatever.
because that's just ridiculous. Because we all know that Muhammad was murdering and raping people. So you were proud of Muhammad being a warlord. So quit this nonsense. Quit saying
we are proud.
Yeah, you were proud of it. You're proud of the fact that he's a warlord. Islam, the Quran talks about how fighting is enjoined upon you, though you dislike it. So Allah tells you to fight and murder and slaughter people. You're like, oh, Muhammad didn't have to slaughter anyone. Why?
He just chose to because he really liked it. He didn't have to.
He didn't have to.
He went to new towns. He went to new towns, and they're all like, Muhammad, you're such a great prophet. Can we follow Islam? And he's like, no, I will behead 800 of you with my own hands.
Yeah. I mean, really. This is just pathetic. We are not ignorant of Islam. You can't lie to us. So you can come back in 5 minutes. No, he's not deciding if childhood marriage is wrong. He's saying child marriage is great, because he's claiming that Rebecca was married as a child, even though the Torah explicitly uses terms of her that are not acceptable for a prepubescent, yet they have to lie about her because they love child marriage so much. All right.
And she was carrying hundreds of pounds of water back and forth as a 3-year-old child.
And speaking in full adult sentences and going out on her own. I often send my 3-year-old out to do chores.
Difficult household chores, right?
Difficult household chores. Many feet, like 100, 200, 500 yards from my house. Yeah, I do that all the time. All right, so here are the divergent maximum limits. Now, of course, it says before this that they make a huge deal about the minimum time being generally the minimum that before extra technology children would usually survive. Okay, great. But the maximum time, here are the actual sources. The Hanafis, including Ibn Hanbal, according to one of the opinions attributed to him, said that it was 2 years, along with Sufyan al-Thawri. This position draws on the hadith of Jamila bint Sa'ad, who recounted, according to Aisha, that pregnancy does not last more than 2 years. But this view was vehemently rejected by Malik. The second argument mentioned by this group was the experience of al-Dahad bint al-Muzahim. I'm not sure whether it's Muzahim or Muzahim. I don't know this name. Sorry. And Harb bint Hibban, whose mothers gave birth to them after 2 years of pregnancy. Their third argument is a story transmitted by Saeed. This is Ibn, not Bint. These were two men whose mothers. Saeed ibn Mansur, according to which in times of Umar, a man who had left his wife for 2 years reported her to the caliph upon returning because she was pregnant when he showed up again. When Umar sentences her to stoning, Muaqqad advised him to wait until she gave birth. Then Umar confined her. She gave birth to a child who had already started teething. When the man saw the child, he claimed him as his son. 4 years is the Shafi'i opinion, as well as the most widespread. Why would it be widespread? Because Muhammad was born after 4 years. The most widespread one attributed to Malik ibn Anas and Hanbal himself. Their argument is that in lack of a specific textual basis, the matter is subject to occurrence. Cases of pregnancy that lasted 4 years having been reported, including Muhammad's mom. Another argument used to support the position is that Umar's order to flog the pregnant wife of a man who had been lost for 4 years, implying that his decision was due to her having exceeded the 4-year pregnancy limit. A similar course of action was transmitted from Uthman, Ali, and other authorities. Other durations include 3, 5, 6, 7 years, 1 year, or 9 months. Some fuqaha disagree with the aforementioned 2 and 4 year limit, like Al-Layth ibn Sa'ad. He held maximum 3 years, drawing on the case of a client of Umar ibn Abd Allah, who gave birth after 3 years of pregnancy. According to the second opinion, translated from Malik on the matter, the limit is 5 years, where some of his companions extend the duration to 7 years. Another one said there were 6. Both durations were acceptable for the Quran and Hadith expert Al-Zuri, who was from Medina, whereas Maliki ibn Abd al-Hakam, who is an Egyptian, departed from his school with this matter and proposed 1 complete year at longest. The latter position was close to Ibn Hazm's view that pregnancy cannot last more than 9 months. Ibn Rushd al-Hafid, better known as Averroes, commented in his book that the relevant legal norm should rely on common experience rather than exceptional cases. And that Abd al-Hakam, which is 1 year at longest, and the Zahiris were closer than the rest in these criteria. So another one person states that refusing to fix a maximum is the most solid option because there are so many differences. The rest, he claims, draw mere stories in individual cases from which no pattern can be derived. He also rejects the 9 months because he finds that the Quran verses he adduced in his support are relevant for both the minimum duration of pregnancy and breastfeeding, but say nothing about the maximum duration. So you have these extreme cases that are baked into Islam. Why? Oh, and this is one of the most hilarious ones. In some traditions, 4 years of pregnancy is described as a genetic trait shared by kin groups like the Bani Ajlan and the women of the Majashun family, and even Ali's descendants. So the descendants of Muhammad and Ali have the genetic trait of being complete whores, apparently, because they have tons and tons and tons of very long pregnancy periods. That was very funny. Do you like the idea of a genetic trait of having extremely long births here? Ascribed to Ali's descendants? Because apparently the women among
I think that's a scientific miracle, right? They had some conception of genetics that if such a trait did exist, it would probably be passed on genetically. So there you go.
Yep.
Michelle does ask a valid question. Do many Muslims still believe this jurisprudence of 2-year pregnancy? I would guess most have no clue it exists, but
yeah, a lot have no clue it exists. Apparently in North Africa, it's still a common belief among common people, but it's pretty funny.
But I would say that the scholars of Islam have to believe this, and they just don't talk about it because it's so embarrassing.
Yep.
Because the way Islam works is that if there's a consensus of scholars, especially in the early times, that is infallible, right? That's as good as it gets for doctrine. So you can't change the doctrine. So if you're able to have 4-year pregnancies or even 2-year pregnancies back in the day, well, it's still possible today. They just don't want to mention it because it's too embarrassing.
So notice that Saudi Arabia still has a long pregnancy time, 4 years maximum limit, is still held in Saudi because it has the most historical legal system. Hisham al-Sheikh, he says that, science just does not know about the nasab lineage, and how lineage works. Just wrong. The former Grand Mufti of Egypt also supports the traditional view of pregnancy lasting 4 years at maximum. So, yeah.
To be clear, this is being taught in like pre-med classes, right?
Well, no, these are not taught in pre-med classes. These are not medical things at all. This is 100% jury type of like jurisprudence.
Okay, so
all the
only
legal scholars.
taught to the scholars, right? Not taught to others.
And it's taught to common Muslims.
Okay.
So
yeah,
common Muslims, scholars, all of those sorts of folks. The only people who aren't being taught this.
so what you're saying
are
is more
the
like it'd be
doctors.
high school as opposed to college, pre-med, university, whatever you want to call it.
Right. You'll run into it, and you'll probably run into it in high school in a lot of these places. But notice you cannot disprove this by DNA, because DNA is no evidence in the system. It's just not evidence.
Oh, hold on, Mary. We got another Muslim in the chat. The whole channel is biased and hateful towards Muslims. These people need to take a shower. Where have we been hateful towards Muslims? I would like you to give me some evidence. Unless reading the Quran,
he's not even paying attention. Okay, you said, oh, he's going after Una. You said the Quran isn't for all time because it says that, but dismiss things not approved of now. In Bible is something God doesn't approve of. Yeah, it sounds like a contradiction and bias. So,
do you even know what those words
contradict
mean,
himself constantly? Company, does Allah say one thing is evil and then later says that evil thing is something that you should be doing? If Allah has defined something as evil, does he say that you should do it later on? So,
yep. So a company gets the same warning. It's weird, right? No matter what topic we have, Muslims want to come into the chat and talk about something else. Like, if we were talking about something other than this, they'd come in here and they'd be like, "Why aren't you talking about Islamic marriage?"
Yep.
But today, right, they want to talk about the Bible, always a favorite topic of Muslims. I can't blame them. The Bible's a good topic. But or how Islam invented science, or that Islam and Judaism are the same thing. Okay. We can talk about that, but that's not today's topic. You need to be on topic for today.
Nope,
if you want to discuss about how wonderful Islamic science is, or how about you love Judaism,
it's so
go
amazing
ahead and email me. Listed in the description, Thaddeus at reasonanswers.com, and you can set up a discussion on your favorite topic. Absolutely any topic related to Islam. But instead, he just keeps spamming, indicating that he hasn't done as I told him to turn on his volume. Yep. So, time out.
Company is kind of listening. So, company, listen carefully. You're timed out for 300 seconds for 5 minutes, but listen carefully. Muslims are the only people who think that certain verses in the Bible talk about rape, about going and raping women who are captives of war. No one else thinks that. The rabbis never thought that. Christians never thought that. Muslims see young girls in the power of men and they go, I can't imagine doing anything with these females other than raping them. Because that is what you are trained to believe. You see girls and the power of men and you went, the only thing there for is sex. That is about you. That is not about what the Bible says. So, again, I want you to specifically say whether or not Allah will say that something explicitly is an abomination and then tell you to do it. Will Allah say this act, if you do these specific steps, this is an abomination? And then will he turn around and say, if this happens, you need to do these steps, the same thing that he's already called an abomination? So before I do want to bring up the last super chats because we're starting to run low on time.
All righty. Yeah. So I got a few comments that I'll take, and then I'll take one of the super chats. So good conversation here from Allah. Why are you bullying my boy? He did nothing wrong. It was all Allah. Indeed.
Much.
And then this is actually what I was intending when I said a good conversation. He says, not sure if people know it, but I have renovated the Kaaba multiple times.
That's
George
right.
Bernard said, indeed, but the Kaaba is still empty, I think. Tell us more. And Allah said, Kaaba is more like a shed, to be fair. I store some fishing gear there. Frankly, it's never supposed to become a big thing like it did. Sounds about right.
The funny thing is that the people who first built the Kaaba were so incompetent that it wasn't even square. I don't know how to explain to you guys how early societies figure out how to make square buildings if they care to. Like, if you're building your own house, why you might not bother, right? You just want something that's square-ish with a roof on it. It can be a bit lopsided. Nobody cares that much. You're building your holy site, and you can't even figure out that the diagonals ought to be equal. It takes one piece of rope to make a square building. And the people who first built the Kaaba did not have this knowledge. Amazing.
So Apologetics London official, I suggest you change your name to something that isn't obviously a lie, or you'll be blocked on this channel, because this is like the fourth time you come in here. Your picture, your profile picture is someone flicking someone off. And just like the fourth time you've come in here and accused me of hating Muslims, when I don't hate Muslims in the slightest, and I've explained this to you multiple times. So the next time you come in here and spew garbage about me hating Muslims, you will be permanently blocked from this channel, because your name is a lie. It's intended to deceive people, just like your fake God is intended to deceive people and has deceived you. I am saying this not because I hate you as a Muslim, but rather because I love you and want you to know the truth. If I hated Muslims, I would say nothing and allow them to go to hell. Instead, I spend my life trying to get Muslims out of Islam so they can see the truth and know the love of God.
And I'm
Why
not
are
your
you
mom,
upset?
so
Debate what I said, not my profile. What you said is that I hate Muslims. That is what I am debating. I don't hate Muslims. You don't get the right to tell me what I hate. Yeah, Care might have said that, but who? All right. Goodbye. Goodbye. You are clearly not interested in actual discussion or honesty or anything else.
No.
When you grow up and you stop acting like a pathetic child who tries to provoke people by pretending to be a Christian apologist, that once you do that, once you grow up, email me and we can have a discussion on the topic of your choice.
And,
okay?
and that's your sister you're thinking about, who's so sweaty. I just wear makeup with shimmer in it. So I'm not your sister.
Well, I mean, his
mom,
sister's probably getting really sweaty from all the men visiting her.
Yep. So
who are wearing burqas when they do so.
Well, yes, I was very obviously a Muslim, and he's been a Muslim every time he comes on. I think it's
yeah, I entertained him the previous times, but all he does is the same exact statements every single time comes in here. It's like, why do you hate Muslims? Yeah. Christians, good Christians like me don't hate Muslims.
So Muslims are getting super upset because we're talking about the fact that their wives and their mothers and their sisters are having babies after 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years that they have last been in the same city with their husbands, which every rational person understands that this means that they're carrying on with other men. So that would be why they're getting super, super upset by this, because the amount of misattributed paternity in Islamic nations has historically been incredibly high. So why don't, it's just the same person coming in each time. So we're just going to hide him on the channel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're not
So-
that stupid, buddy. You can't just come in with a new name and say the same messages and expect us to be fooled. Maybe that would fool your Islamic apologists because they actually are that stupid, but it won't fool us. Now, continuing on with the stream, IR Review says, when will you be doing a mass apologist live stream? And well, said, will you be doing one? I definitely like to do that in the near future. Nothing specific on the plans, but definitely something that's coming up. And as I promised, a super chat. This one from Joshua Wooden.
Here's the sad news. We are running out of funds. All our work is going to stop unless people like you watching this video will help us. Your donations can get you a share in a reward. Reap those rewards for years to come, inshallah. This is not a donation or a charity, but an investment for your hereafter.
All right. Thank you for your investment in your hereafter. 2 questions from Joshua Wooden. What's Surah 321 mean? Kill those who enjoin equity. I mean, I would have.
No. So what it's saying is that. So you're giving a certain group of people.
Hold on.
Okay, it says, give those who refuse to follow this is a dumb translation. Indeed, here's a better translation. Indeed, those who disbelieve in the revelations of Allah and slay the prophets wrongfully and slay those of mankind who enjoin equity, promise them a painful doom is what it says, but it's actually give them glad tidings of a painful doom. So there are 3 descriptions of the people who are disbelieving in Allah. So, or revelations, the signs, the miracles, the signs of Allah. They also are those who slay the prophets wrongfully, because apparently you can rightfully slay prophets according to Allah here. And then the third category, or the third description of the same group of people, is that they are those who slay those of mankind who enjoin equity. It's not saying you should slay those of mankind who enjoin equity. Allah's grammar is terrible. His diction is terrible. But what he's saying is that there's this category of those who, and they're described by 3 things. They disbelieve in the ayah. They slay the prophets wrongfully rather than correctly. And they also slay the people who are calling people to equity. And so to those
unjustly,
people,
right?
3 things. Yeah. Well, wrongfully, I think it's what's the Arabic there? I'm forgetting.
I mean, I would imagine it's unjustly as opposed to incorrect with the incorrect means.
It's wrongly. Like you're slaying them unjustly, but there is an implication there that there is a way to slay them that would be just. It's like without. So
it is the method. It is the method. You use the wrong method to slay them.
No, not the wrong method, but you're doing it without having a right to kill them, without having the right, as if you could have a right.
Okay, so yes, unjustly then. Okay.
But it's saying that in the context, what it's implying is that there is a possibility that you can slay prophets in a way that is not unjust. That's what's so funny.
Well, if they're false prophets, I mean,
without a right.
I mean,
without having a right.
I mean,
there is no idea of false prophets in Islam, though. There are only prophets.
Anyway, then so the second question here, are verses 23 and 24 a good example of the Islamic dilemma? So let's look at verses 23 and 24.
So,
do you not consider those who were given a portion of the scripture, they were invited to the scripture of Allah, that it should arbitrate between them when a party
No,
of them
you
turns
can't look
away.
at that one. That's
I know.
still a mistranslation.
It's
Yeah,
not international.
bring up
Relax, Mary.
yeah, bring up mine.
Let me just read this first, right? Okay. And then we'll get the correct translation. That is because they say they will never touch us except for numbered days, and they were deluded in their religion by what they were inventing. Well, I mean, what they're inventing here is going to give you a clue about what the correct translation of this part really should be.
All right.
And so
Hang on. I already have mine up. But note that before you have to give them the good news or the gospel of a painful torment, because Muhammad didn't know what a gospel was. But also, those are the ones who have become worthless. Their deeds in this world are worthless in this world and in the hereafter, and there won't be any helpers for them. He loves this word helpers because he thinks that the word Christian comes from helper because he doesn't understand. Haven't you seen those who were given a portion of the book? The book of Allah, that it should arbitrate between them, and then one party turns from them, and they are those who are averse. So there's somebody who only has a portion of the book, and they're invited to the book of Allah that should arbitrate between them. But there's a problem. The book of Allah most often is the Bible or the Torah or the Injil. So, oh yeah, that's just hikmah. Never mind. That's just the hikmah root. So the book of Allah should judge, but they have the portion of the scripture, then they have the scripture. They have it. And this is, this one actually
what it's judging, I believe, Mary, what I believe, it's not judging the text, it's judging whether or not they are accurately telling you what the text says.
Yep.
So people come, Muhammad says that he's revealing the same message. People come to him and they say, what are you talking about? Our message is totally different. And he says, see, these people are lying. They have the same message in their book. They're just not telling you what's in their book.
Yeah, if you keep on going, I remember this. So what are they lying about? They're lying that they say, and this is something he accuses the Jews of, I think in the previous chapter, that the fire will never touch us except for a few days, but they're deceived in their religion. According to what? According to the book that they already have with them, that they were given this book, and then that it needs to, and so the book in general can judge between them, and it's accusing them here of lying about their book, because they're saying that they will not roast in the fire, but Muhammad's claiming that the book that they have will even say that they will roast in the fire. He's not saying it says something different. So
yeah, and according to the Quran, everyone, including all Muslims, go to hell first, and then Allah takes some people out of it. So which is consistent with what he thinks the book should say.
Yeah, which is funny because, we said, well, he's saying that because they're not admitting that his book is exactly the same as theirs, they're going to go in hell forever. But they're saying that they will only roast for a few days. But Muhammad later says that, no, that's about us. We're only going to be touched for a few days. So it is condemning the Jews and Christians who are rejecting Muhammad, but it's not condemning their book. It's only condemning them.
And I do apologize if the stream is getting kind of wonky. I am having some internet issues at the moment. I don't know. It might be fine for the people on it, but it's definitely pretty wonky for me. So I apologize if other people are getting something wonky. Well, yeah, of course it's good on your end. It's not your internet.
But I mean, I'm getting it from you so.
Okay.
So I don't know whether or not what's up with that. But
It might be fine for the audience. It might just be me, but like you were breaking up and stuff. So
Yeah, no, there is no plural of majesty in Eastern languages. That does not exist. Cargo crew. That's just silly. That is not a feature of any language, and especially not a
the whole thing's
plural.
really silly.
What? Yeah, well,
The whole thing's really silly because
Yeah.
the plural majesty is plural because it's actually plural. The queen or king speaks for the whole court. They speak for many people. They speak for the whole country. Who's Allah speaking for when he's using the plural majesty?
Well, that's also a
Like the
late
court of
Western
angels?
development. That's not
Right?
even a Middle
Right.
Eastern thing.
I know that's a way. I know it's Western, but I'm saying even if it was true, it still wouldn't help
No.
resolve the we situation. And that came up. I was going to take it till later, but since you started
Sorry.
addressing it rudely, Michelle says, this is off topic, so sorry, but does anyone find it wild that Allah says we, then demands Trinity wrong, but Tawheed is demanded in his oneness, multiple personality disorder? Well, Tawheed means unification. So what is it unifying if it's not a plurality?
Notice at the
So
very
Muslims are
early-
just very, well, I shouldn't say Muslims. Allah is just very confused. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
So what actually happened is that the very earliest ones all use singular universally. There is a point after several years where suddenly plurals get introduced. And I believe that this gets introduced when some people from Mecca go over to Ethiopia, and the Ethiopian king sends over a delegation to Muhammad to find out what he believes, not to make any definite statements, not to make any promises, find out whether he believes whether or not he can be a good ally. And so he sends over experts in the Christian religion to talk to him. And one of the things I believe that they ask him is, why is it in Genesis 1:26, why does God say we? And they're not calling him out. They're just probing to find out whether or not he's a nutcase. He goes, well, God just says that sometimes, was his answer. And from that point forward, he just starts using we sometimes, which is hilarious.
Like he really has no idea. He just starts
he has
using it
no
because he
idea.
thinks it sounds cool.
And that caused him to fail the test of the Ethiopians, but they didn't call him out at that moment because they weren't here to cause strife. They were here to gather information. They got their information. They went back. They're like, yeah, he's a nutcase, but maybe you can use him. But that shaped the Quran from that point forward, that suddenly Allah sometimes says we.
He just does it because it sounds cool. He has no specific reason. And people have spent extensive time trying to see what all the plural verses versus all the singular verses have in common with one another. And there is no pattern. It's just random. When Allah decides to use we, he uses we.
And there are very, very, very few points in the Bible where we is used and it always means we. It always means plurality. And the Elohim has a plural ending because it's a mass noun. All indefinite mass nouns have plural endings in Hebrew. This isn't about majesty. Waters, for example, being very large and indefinite. Whenever you're talking about the ocean, you call it the waters of the ocean. We even do that in English, the ocean's waters. And so you have this mass noun that is not a literal plural because it takes all singular, all singular forms go with it. So it's not a plural. It just has a plural ending because it is a mass noun. So it's not a plural of majesty, and it doesn't indicate majesty as such. It indicates an indefinite expanse. So.
All right. Did you have any more material, or should I take the rest of the chats?
I do have one tiny piece of material, and that is the origin of Misyar marriage. So when Muhammad couldn't marry anyone else when he married Khadija, because as we already established, it was not an Islamic marriage. He could not have 4 wives because Khadija had the unilateral right to divorce him, and she would have picked him up and kicked him to the curb if he'd added another woman to her. So she had been on her deathbed for some time. So that means that he didn't have sex with her for the time when she was on her deathbed. And that must have been really hard for him, excuse me, because her body was barely cold when he was in bed with another woman, because she died on the 10th of the month. And before the end of the month, he was warming the bed of Sauda. Terrible morning there for his wife. You know, what I would definitely do if my husband died is jump into bed with another man within 20 days. Really shows he cares about her. But again, this is how Muhammad views women, and that society does in general, as utilitarian, an object for his penis to get relief. So Sauda comes in. She was available and she was willing to marry him, even though he had run through his wife's money and was poor at that time. So that's why he married her. Well, at that point, she was already like 35 or something. Soon she turned 40. And goodness knows that the only reason that you have a wife is because you get off with her and she's really tempting to you, and who could only possibly be tempted by a sufficiently young, svelte, healthy, and spry, and the correct proportion of chubbiness that was considered very beautiful then. But Sauda, well, she had gotten old and she sagged now. You know, you're supposed to be plump and firm, not old and saggy. And she had gotten even bigger, and she was slow, and she was a large woman to begin with, which was not considered attractive, and had huge, big old hands, and was really tall and kind of, and had gotten wrinkly, and, you know, you can't possibly love a woman who's wrinkly. So Muhammad kind of started despising her, because Muhammad would, because again, what is the value of a woman? And so she was afraid she was going to be divorced. Now, in the pagan system, marriage was maintained by an exchange, and what men had to give a woman was absolutely definite. They had to give them a certain number of nights of their sexual favor so that the woman could have children who could support her in her old age. They absolutely had to give her the support of the house, and they absolutely had to give her food and those other basic necessities. And Sauda realized that he didn't want to have intercourse with her anymore. He didn't want to give her the things that he'd given her before. And so she said, I will transfer my night from me to your favorite wife, Aisha. So you'll get a double dose of Aisha, and you won't ever have to stick yourself in me anymore, and won't ever have to come to my house anymore. So, you know, she's got a house without Muhammad in it. Win-win, all right? And that's what she did. She gave up those rights. And apparently Muhammad got some flack for that, but he declared that if you fear that your husband dislikes you, that he is seeing that he is feeling an uprising against you, it's good for you women if you give him anything that he wants to make him happy. You should give him what he desires from you to satisfy him, so that you will still get food and clothing and shelter at the bare minimum level. And otherwise, you are a greedy, terrible person. This is the basis for Misyar marriage or traveler's marriage, even though that particular marriage started out on a normal footing, and then her rights were massively reduced. But because they could be reduced, that created the legal precedent that you can then contract a marriage without ever having the intention of having the full exchange that you normally have in a marriage. As such, as much of a marriage can be. So it created this entire category of marriages where you don't even give in exchange for the woman's sex what was considered the bare necessities in the pagan system, that you can give even less as long as a woman agrees to it. And so that is what Misyar marriage is. The difference between Misyar marriage and Muta marriage is that Muta is prostitution with an negotiated price ahead of time, just like Misyar, but it has a definite end date, meaning that a definite total price and a definite end date, because it can be for like 3 days or 2 hours or 5 hours that this man has paid for, and then you go on your ways. This is considered not zina, but is considered legal nikah. Because how is it different from any other? Once you have Misyar, where you can pull out the rights, the only thing that this marriage does is that it puts a definite end date on it instead of it being indefinite. That's it. And the muta was discontinued by Umar. So again, this is the Sunnah of Umar. There are some Shia sources some Sunni sources that attempt to say Muhammad got rid of it, but he absolutely did not. But it was continued in Shia Islam because Ali loved his muta marriage and did not want it to go away. So that is why they exist, and that is why this woman who is accusing Hijab of mistreating her is saying that she was so terribly mistreated because she was given a Misyar marriage. And apparently she just did not connect the fact that she had agreed to a secret marriage meant that she had agreed to a Misyar marriage. And if she didn't spell out what she was owed, he owed her nothing. So
yeah, well, I mean, he did make promises, right? But if he didn't put them in the contract, then as far as hijab's concerned, and as far as many Islamic jurists, perhaps not all, I don't know every Islamic jurist, but many Islamic jurists would agree, right? They'd say it's not in the contract. Do you not know what nikah is? Nikah is just a contract that legalizes sex. You don't have any guarantee of anything. If you agree to the contract with provisions X, Y, and Z, well, that's your fault, not the man's fault. So there you go. Allah says, muta is how I bless hookups, mashallah. Well, it's more like prostitution because the woman definitely gets some money out of it. Whereas the Misyar, that could just be a hookup, right? That could just be, as this comment from earlier, could just be a couple of hamburgers and some French fries and some beds.
Why it's so horrible is that in muta, you get paid.
Yeah.
In Misyar, if you request for a divorce, you don't get paid because you have to give up. You ask for khula. He's given you as much as he said he would, so you don't get your mahr. You do not get your dowry. You do not get the money that was promised for access to your coochie. He got your coochie. He gave you nothing. You're the one who asked for divorce. He's perfectly willing to continue to use your coochie and give you nothing. So it's your fault. You get nothing. You get thrown out. So muta, you get something. Misyar, unless he divorces you, if you divorce him because you don't like it anymore, you do not get your mahr. You do not get your payment. So you've just agreed to be his side chick for absolutely nothing.
Yep. Maybe you get some hamburgers and French fries. But I loved this string of emojis there. It was earlier, but fits perfectly right now. And by the way, I did block the Muslim whose name is Company. He came back from timeout and started posting graphic descriptions of sex. So I blocked him. Vile descriptions, I should say, and saying that's what I do. So, of course, I blocked him. AT Ministry says, is there an Islamic requirement for the man to satisfy, i.e. orgasm, his wife?
No. And a woman is to make her body available.
Right,
so she is a tool to be used for his orgasm. In fact, women are idealized as passive mattress-like beings that you manipulate as you wish.
Allah says marriage is a contract. No need for emotions. I made it efficient. I'll do myself. But I think he means easy, right? I think that's what he means. Allah says, I made it easy.
And that's exactly right. As I have mentioned many times, whenever Islam talks about the easiness of the religion, this is interpreted by the Tafsir to be explicitly referring to how easy it is for Muslim men to lead a life that is considered desirable, that is considered admirable, and not violate Allah's terms. And sex is specifically listed among the ways that's really easy not to sin in Islam, because there are so many ways for men to get their sexual pleasure without zina, meaning illegal sex. There's so many ways that they can have as much legal sex as they like, with as many people as they want, with as many women as they want. They can trade them out. They can buy slaves. They can contract these even more fake marriages. That is why Islam is the easy religion when compared to the other religions of the book. Like, this is an argument for Islam that these people think is a really good argument for Islam. Why it's true.
Yeah, well, from a certain perspective, Islam taking anything that's considered to be immoral, but you want to do, and then giving you a way to do it, whether we're talking about sex or stealing or various other things, in a way that is an argument for certain people, certain types of people, to convert to the religion. Hence why Islam is so popular in prisons. So T says, by chance, did you see my comments by chance? Well, no, but I found them after you said that and dug them up. So he says, Mrs. Herb, so you're Herb now, Mary, may you please help me? I'm writing a paper towards someone, a Muslim in need. Your help fact-checking it. It's related to this topic. If you're interested, may you help me? And if not, may you please send me suggestions?
You can send it to my email address. So I just put that in the chat.
So Misyar apparently just came in here and says,
well, the reason why he spelled it Harb is because it's the E and the short A are the same. And
Mary, we don't need an explanation. We don't need an explanation for
well,
for
he's
typing.
like, I'm sorry for misspelling. I'm like, it's not misspelling. It's just a different spelling. It's fine. It's fine.
It's no big deal. It was just a little joke. So Misyar says, what the F is she talking about? Presumably you, Mary. So Misyar, welcome to the stream. You have a lot to learn about Islam. I suggest you watch through this and learn the truth about the religion that you possibly follow. Muslim Raisin Head said, before Muhammad, they also didn't marry 6-year-old kids. Indeed, another right given to women in Islam. Before, they had to wait a very long time before they could have a husband, but they no longer have to wait. This increases their rights.
Yeah.
John Wilson says, are there male Muslim gynecologists? If so, how is this dealt with? Or how is the checking for pregnancy dealt with? Like,
there are in some, so there are, especially in places like Egypt. It would have been, in a historical context, it would have been checking by women, not actually by physicians. Like midwives and so on would be the ones checking in historical contexts. And also because you are legally forcing a woman to do this, the rules are different. Like, men can look at a woman's entire body before he marries her. It's not even just her face and hands. It's her whole naked body, to see whether or not the money that he's spending on her is a good expense, essentially. Whether or not he's buying nice property for himself, just like slaves can always be examined before they're purchased. So the idea of concealment is conditional on the context. So, no, 65:4 does not show that they married kids prior to getting relation from Allah that gave permission for it. No, because Allah gave Muhammad permission to marry Aisha, and that was the revelation that okayed it. So they were already having intercourse with the children, but it was because of Muhammad's example. The pagans did not have intercourse with prepubescent children. This is an Islamic creation.
Una says, imagine having to wait a whole 18 years before being allowed to marry a 54-year-old. I know. Women just had no rights before Muhammad came and changed everything. I'm so glad he came and allowed little children to marry old men. Before that, it just didn't have, females just didn't have any rights. So Mizra says, is Mary wearing a hijab? She's not wearing a hijab. You do not have exclusive rights to head covering in Islam. They existed before Islam. They existed in many different cultures. People are allowed to have head coverings without being Muslims. Just
Yep.
saying.
And notice also, what did Muhammad specifically say about turbans? I'm showing my neck. Are you like just completely consumed now with lust that you can't control yourself? Because you can see bits of my neck there. But yeah, Muhammad specifically said that women with turbans were going to go to hell, and so I thought that was funny. So I always wear a turban.
Mm-hmm. And besides, what is the purpose of covering for women in Islam? Is it to hide their hair? Or is it so they can't be recognized at all? Well, we can recognize Mary. So It's not following the Islamic doctrine. Just saying.
Yep. Even women who wear just hijabs without niqabs, they aren't following Islam correctly. Yes, some of the fairly early Islamic scholars got rid of Muhammad's actual teaching because it was so horrible and oppressive to women who had to work to survive. But yeah, it's not that would not be the correct Islamic practice.
So Jedediah says, the great Artemis Kuti Tabby Cat is learning a lot about Islam and Nikah to spread awareness to other of her kind, not to become a Muslim. I corrected the last word. A Muslim. And you should all do the same. You should all take Artemis's example and spread this material to whoever will listen and tell them about the terrible things found in Islam.
But keep in mind that this
is
not
not because we hate Muslims, but because we want to save women who are oppressed by Islam.
Yeah, and the hijab was never a symbol of modesty. We need to be very clear about that. The idea that it has something to do with modesty, it's not. It has to do with anonymity, because what was happening is that men were arranging assignations with Muslim women for sex when the women went out into the fields to poop at night, because Muhammad was still scared of latrines and thought demons were in them and would kill everyone and make them all ill and curse them. So the Muslim women up through at least, 628 were still, or 627 were pooping outdoors, and probably around 628, when more people joined Muhammad, they started using latrines. But men would go out, arrange with women to meet together, and then have sex. And, in the darkness, they could see so-and-so fairly well and could go, hey, Zainab, over here. It's me, Muhammad, so-and-so. And then they would go off and do their stuff. It also meant that they could target women who went out alone, although women almost always went out in pairs to poop so that they wouldn't be assaulted, so that they could grab a woman and have his way with her. But by being unable to tell them apart, then that provided, that made it very difficult for these arrangements to take place. It just meant that they replaced it by different arrangements during the daytime, but that was the point. And then slave women had to go out uncovered so that they could be picked out and assaulted at will by the Muslim men. It's about hiding your identity from Muslim men or exposing it and putting yourself at risk for sexual access. That is the historical context. That is the meaning. And that is why rape and being covered or uncovered are so incredibly connected. It is not about any concept of modesty that we might have today.
And Misha says, I can't distinguish Mary from the Trinity. Quran is scientific miracle. Even in turban, she's still part of the Trinity. So it's not working, Mary.
Yeah.
He still can't distinguish you from the Trinity. So sorry. Jedediah says, hey, bro, Thaddeus, I just joined now again. See, it's a miracle, a timing miracle. I was glad to see my comments on the great Artemis cute tabby cat. See, it's a miracle that you rejoined it right at the right time. CD, which in a different comment was the Columbus Dispatch, said, guys, I'm converting to Islam because Allah clearly punishes all the haters of Islam. Thaddeus lost his job. Mary's background fell down. This is the proof. You see? This is the proof.
Oh, no.
CD also said, I'm thinking.
Yeah. Oh, bring up Cyber Flenner's Old Catholics comment next, if you could, after that. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Just a second. This comment is related to that first one, and it's something to answer. So I'm thinking about pretending to convert to Islam for like a month on my comedic meme page. Do you think that would be sinful? I mean, it depends on the exact context, but if it's on a page that's about jokes, then I think it would be fine. Like if you were trying to deceive people and actually pretend you converted to Islam, that would be wrong. But if you're just satiring the idea of converting, I think it's perfectly fine. All right. So Old Catholic says, that's interesting. Was that the case in Bible times?
Absolutely not. So it was about your rank. It was a symbol of rank in Bible times. It may stem from some very, very, very ancient.
It being head covering, right?
Head covering may extend to some incredibly ancient beliefs about demons and evil forces and things like that are not Christian or Jewish. They just kick around in almost every society. That at weddings and with pregnant women, that they're particularly susceptible to evil influences. And so you will find in most cultures there are special activities undertaken to like deceive spirits, and among them you'll have fake abduction weddings. They don't exist because once upon a time all women were abducted or anything like that. It's to make the evil spirits think that something bad is happening so they won't curse your wedding and make it bad. So it's this pretense. Kids being given weird milk names like Brick or Door Handle or Dirt Clod until they're a certain age while they're really so easy to die is found in a number of cultures too. And the idea of hiding through covering yourself up is found in a huge number of wedding traditions, that brides are like hidden away from view during the wedding itself. And that is probably connected to it because a lot of women spend a good portion of their time pregnant after marriage, not sure whether or not they were pregnant a good portion of the time. And so just wearing something over their head probably started there. By the time the Bible period comes around, it is a symbol of a married woman. So unmarried women did not cover their hair at all. And it was primarily seen as this symbol so that you look around and you see the married women because they had something on their heads. They were not covering up their hair. They were not concealing their hair. Like the way they wore their head coverings, the hair was still visible the vast majority of the time. It was not about concealment. And everybody breastfed publicly too, by the way. So like these folks weren't like wrapped up and stuff. You'd walk down the street and see a boob and nobody would think anything of it. So it's not about like concealing someone. It's also not about modesty in the sense of needing to cover up the entire body to avoid a male gaze or something like that. It's about distinguishing the married from the unmarried. It's the unmarried girls who are young and eligible for marriage who would be most lusted after, right? They're the most eligible. they did not have head coverings in ancient society. They do not have head coverings in any Jewish society now. They did not have head coverings in Christian society or in Roman society, because that wasn't what the head covering was about. You wore your hair up and you put something over it, however nominal, to symbolize a marriage, just like people wear wedding rings today. It was not about concealing oneself.
So-
the reason why, just in final statement, the reason why nuns have the particular habits that you see some nuns have with the extreme portions, those were actually just from the fashion of the period when those particular fashions got set. So at that time, and it was considered luxurious. And as we get older, one's chins tends to become chins no matter what. And so kind of concealing this under a little bit of muslin gives you a more youthful look. And that's literally where the fashion is from. Older women wearing things that hide the sagging jowls. And it became a fashion for
So you're
all
saying it was to
women.
make them look more attractive,
Yes,
not
it was.
for modesty.
It was. So the under chin stuff in the West is totally to hide the fact that we sag when we get older. And because some very famous and rich women, Eleanor of Aquitaine was like the one who really made it popular and stayed popular for well over 100 years just because of her. And that's where it's from, to make her look prettier as she started getting a little bit saggy.
Yeah, so the reason that it's talked about in Corinthians is that it would be equivalent to, say, ripping off your wedding ring, right? Throwing your wedding ring aside while preaching, which obviously creates a cultural problem, implies something very different than the message you want to send, and thus it's a cultural block and not something you should do, even though it's not immoral in and of itself not to have your hair covering in that culture. It would give the wrong message, wrong impression about what Christianity is all about. Houston said, wasn't Leah hidden from Jacob during the wedding?
During the wedding.
Yeah,
she
but
was
that was a
getting
trick.
married. Well, she was also getting married, and that's the time when women were most covered up. You'll find in a huge number of cultures, like we talk about, oh, the wedding veil is about modesty. No, it's not. It's this holdover. First of all, our modern wedding veil is like a very modern reinvention that was kind of inspired by Roman veils. But Roman girls were veiled over their faces during their wedding only time that they were veiled over their faces. And again, that was probably because of these, it was just tradition at that time. Nobody thought of anything else, but it was probably because of these really ancient ideas of malignant influences and curses and spells and demons and evil things that might happen to you during this very vulnerable time. Chinese brides all over the place. You will find brides all over the globe who are only totally covered up during the wedding ceremony, not before, not after, but during, because of these ancient worries that people just had.
And also, I wouldn't look to that story as an example of the proper way of doing things. Just saying.
No. That would be like a warning why you shouldn't follow this ancient tradition of hiding wives. He used that to allow Leah to be covered up, and look what happened. Let's not do that anymore.
Zen Master said, uncovered women were a social sign of being available. Yeah, being single, right? Which means you're available. I mean, you put it in quotes. I think you're trying to say sexually available. That may or may not be inaccurate, but they certainly were available in terms of being available for marriage. So if you're a married woman and you're taking off your head covering, you're essentially saying, I'm not married to my husband anymore, which obviously creates a problem. Yeah. I think you can see. Right? Which is not about modesty or anything else. It's about sending a false message.
And you will find in Islamic sources that old women aren't required to cover up anymore. Why? Because nobody would want to have intercourse with them. Black women, similarly, in some sources are said not to need to cover up because they are considered so unattractive that they are not vulnerable to this sexual impulse. Like, that's how awful Islam is, that they claim that. But you will find in Western tradition, because it's associated, yeah. Oh, I was going to say in Western tradition,
and slaves are required to not be covered.
Correct.
Because they are available, right?
Correct. And you will find that because it is the symbol of, and being married means that you're a head of household. You cannot be married in Western civilization because the father and mother, they leave the family, establish a new household. So if you are a married woman, you are a head of household. You have this authority, is a symbol of authority. So you will find in Western tradition that very typically, the older you are, the more covering and elaborate your head thing gets, because you're claiming like more authority in society as you go on. And so, head covering that would be acceptable for an 80-year-old would be kind of people who are 20 or 30 wearing it would be given kind of weird looks, like, why are you claiming? Because it's a claim of status of the elder of society. It's not just that you're old, it's that you have status as an elder and this authority that comes with it. So you can just look at old paintings and you can look at the different ages of women in there, and you can see unmarried women wearing very little on their hair, and their hair's down and loose underneath it. And then that you have your first stage of married women, and then you have your older married and or widowed women who tend to be the most covered. And it's not because of sexual, it's because of dignity and position and authority and all of that stuff that they get more covered. It's not because they're more in need of modesty, shall we say. And the huge hats on the nuns were sisters, they weren't nuns. And so it was to distinguish themselves from the actual nuns, which is a whole different thing. So it's a sister versus nun. Nuns aren't sisters and sisters.
Yeah, we don't need to like detail.
Yeah, we don't need to go into the history of sisters wearing things other than veils.
Muslim Raisin had said the nuns are also wearing hijab. You see.
You see, this is the proof. This is the proof.
Definitely the proof there, right? And he said this as a joke, but I've actually had multiple Muslims tell me this exact thing, that even nuns know that you're supposed to wear hijabs. This is proof that you're not following your religion correctly, and that Islam's the true religion. Yours has become corrupted because you forgot about hijabs.
And again, nuns wear so much partly because of the dignity aspect, because they have the highest dignity, highest position. So they have the, even the sisters who are different from nuns, they have more substantial covering because of their higher dignity, not because of their higher modesty, in the sense that everybody's going to want to have sex with them, so they need to cover up, right? And nuns do not wear hijabs.
And Allah said, oh, so it's like young girls don't get fancy headdress because they haven't earned the status, something like that. So D. Gassi said, what is a half jinn? Well, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's jinns are a different species than human beings, to use modern terms. They're different creatures, but for some reason they can have sex with human beings and create a baby. So then it's half human, half jinn.
And some of them are receptive male gay in some traditions, just so you know. Or like, they must have
jinns are both genders, right?
But well, no, specifically men who are receptive and have sex with men are considered to be jinn babies, and who remain receptive into adulthood.
Gotcha.
It must be because their dad was a jinn.
Gotcha. So Michelle said, my friend was told by his imam, when I have questions to ask, he was told not to read the surah in question and best stop talking to me and never ask a question again. I guess I say at least the imam's being honest, because that's the only way someone can stay in Islam. That is good advice from an Islamic perspective, to never look into anything, because if you read the surah, right? So what would I say if someone came to me with that question? The first thing I would say is read the text. Read the text first, and then we'll just
let's see what the actual text says, because they're probably lying about it. And guess what? They're lying about it. So yeah, it's a question of, does the context damn the religion, or does the context provide clarity for the situation? And so my response would be, why is it that he thinks reading the Quran will lead you out of Islam if you do it while you pay attention? Because I agree it will. If you pay attention while you read the Quran, you will leave Islam. But that's one of the reasons why you are only supposed to read it while you chant it, because it distracts you from the meaning of the words.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say to ask your friend at least one more question. Does that sound like a religion that has truth? Or does that sound like a mom who has truth, or someone who's trying to cover something up? Because don't read the text. Sounds like a mission that the text is very bad for the Islamic position. Super chat from CD.
If you frequently say it, Allah would pay off your debts. So you can refer to it back again, inshallah.
Says Islamic refutation. Tell story about Muhammad. Said Puba for every name. Not all the names. Some of them get different. Anyway, quote Quran in Arabic and English. Tell other story till everyone forgets you didn't. Answer the question. Bang kid. Now, that sounds about right. That definitely sounds about right for how apologetics are done in Islam. Thank you very much for that donation. Also from Michelle, in honesty, how can people read sources and not see the evil while reading? What it said confuses me. How can we live in a world where people see a 56-year-old have sex with a child and people defend? Well, I think that in many ways it's strong evidence that there is not just an intellectual question here, not just what an atheist might think, that we're all just biological machines of chemicals firing in our brain, but rather a spiritual battle going on whereby the truth is hidden from the person who is trapped in Islam, and they literally can't see the obviousness of the arguments you're pointing out because they are so infatuated with the demonic religion, right? They're captured by demonic forces, and that would be my answer to that question.
And also, remember that Islam does not define women as having value like men do. They just don't have value. They're not the same. They're not worth the same. They're worth way less. So, I mean, we eat cows. So why wouldn't you treat women terribly if you think that a woman is barely better than a cow? And the thing is, when you have even an atheistic view that derived itself from Christian views of human worth, then it is an abomination to you. But Islam has no connection to Christianity except through tales that slaves told and Muhammad copied. It's from this pagan context. It's from Muhammad's pagan context specifically. So why wouldn't it be like this? Like, what is there? And in a pure, if there were such a thing, everyone grows up in a society, but other societies that don't have the background that ours has, pagan Roman society could not come up with a good argument for why one should even have a wife. And the reason why Christianity won is that Christians had companionate marriages and had children. That's it. And the places that we did not sufficiently evangelize or that reverted to pagan ideas of womanhood and woman's worth are societies that don't have kids. So for Islam has kids because what? They lock up the women to be the breeding cattle of the men. But to value a woman and seek a marriage with her in the Western concept of marriage is something very unusual. So the real question is, why not? Why not treat women like this? And that's the question that
Mm-hmm.
other systems can't actually answer, not coherently.
So Solo says that they sent you that email. So be on the lookout for that. Super chat from Rick Newton.
And Allah will bless you in a million ways. You find the tree will grow and you will have lots and lots of wealth. This is the example that we gave to the children. And I'm letting you know that when you sow that seed by giving, you shall receive much more than you gave by the will of Allah. Give as much as you can, for indeed you will reap much more than you have sown.
So Rick Newton says, Allah, presumably talking to the commenter, Allah, Jesus said I can have alcohol. He's the real God. Thank you very much for that donation there. Houston points out that in Surah 17, verse 1, the speaker uses the pronouns him, his, we, our, and he. So there you go. Allah has a variety of pronouns. You must respect them all. Albino Turtle 4 says, pretty sure there's a hadith that has Muhammad lust over a woman, even if she wore a hijab and ran back to one of his wives to have sex. That is correct. Well, I guess it doesn't specifically say she's wearing a hijab, but it just says Muhammad saw a woman and then ran back home to have sex and grabbed his wife who was creating leather, which is an extremely disgusting and stinky process, threw her on the bed and took her right then and there, is the gist of the story. A very, very self-controlled guy, that Muhammad.
Not only
Muslims would
that,
point to this and be like,
it's worse.
Alhamdulillah, see, Muhammad had self-control. He didn't take that random woman on the street. He went home.
But it's even grosser because guess what his wife was doing at the time? She was busy scraping leather hides to tan leather because that was the main industry of the women of Mecca. So to tan a leather hide, you would have a stinky, hot aged hide that you're scraping the half-rotten flesh off of. And that's what she was doing when he was just so overcome that he whisked her away from scraping hides for tanning. And he does that. By the way, just quick question for Solo Tees. I was reading your paper, and my question is: do you need this very pressingly, or can you wait 2 weeks for Thaddeus to edit something that I've already done? So that is my question for you.
This might be answered.
Yep.
We're just about done here. One last super chat from Michelle this time.
We're asking you to give a loan to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and believe me, that will be paid back in ways you can never imagine.
Who is it that would loan Allah a goodly loan so he may multiply it for him many times over?
Allahu Akbar, I love that verse. Every time we donate to projects, we're giving a loan to our Creator, the most generous, who will return it to us in this life.
Brothers and sisters, can you afford to miss out on this opportunity?
Can you afford to miss out on the screams?
That scream makes me just lose it every time.
We actually didn't get that one during the mega stream with David where we got like dozens of super chats. I was so disappointed because we got others like 5 times, but we didn't get the scream. Anyway, thank you very much, Michelle, for the donation, and good on you for continuing the conversation with your Muslim friend. Mohammed Hijab literally changes Arabic of Quran to twist it, saying he does what Quran accuses the Jews of doing. Indeed. We find the Quran repeatedly affirming that the Bible, or more specifically the Torah and the Gospel, are correct, and that people are just twisting the words with their mouths. And then we get Muslims who go to the Quran and they say, it means exactly the opposite of what the words say on the page. So who's twisting here, right? Who's twisting the words of their supposed God? Is it the Christians who are reading the Bible and saying this contradicts your Quran, or is it the Muslims who are distorting what the Quran says? You be the judge. You be the judge. On
Here,
that.
let me just say.
And then Allah says, you guys are sick. Selling Muhammad Hijab's modesty like that, making him strip in front of everyone for points. Very sick indeed. We apologize. Allah for humiliating your messenger like that. And then from Kargoku, question, is there any insight in Quran which appreciates the depth of mother's love or motherhood? No. I think that was the easiest question to answer today. Like, I don't even realize there's barely anything that even mentions motherhood, let alone appreciates it and talks about the depth of a mother's love.
No, because Muhammad's mother would have let him starve to death. There is no idea of mother's love. Some of the women one of the men, I think it's Azubair, his mother is famous for just beating him and just cruelty, brutalism. It's just, you can't find the idea of this maternal love in Islam. Okay, so Solotes, I have given you links to 2 live streams that have tons and tons and tons of information on this topic. Specific to the age of Aisha herself, there'll be some videos out soon as well, but this is just general stuff on marriage in Islam and in the age of marriage and things like that.
Mm-hmm. RKM says also, please play Give Alone to Allah, Ride the Wings of Al-Dija. Well, they're random. I don't choose which one plays. They are randomly chosen when there's a super chat. So we're just about done today. I actually, interestingly enough, have a teaser. Let's say a teaser that there's going to be some new super chat features coming soon. And not today, but soon you'll get some new stuff on super chats. Mary and I recorded a couple of videos, so we'll get those. I'll get those edited and get those out. Releasing at least one of those a week is the goal. We had one this week. If you haven't checked that out on Jihad, be sure to do so. Another one coming very soon, and I think it's going to be on Islamic marriage, or specifically how Mohammed Hijab. So same general ballpark as today's stream, but a completely different topic. So It's not like just a summary of today's stream or something.
No,
but
I'm talking about a wife.
Mohammed Hijab.
Yeah, I'm talking about a wife whose name I did not even mention today, and who is rarely mentioned, but who is very important. So you can.
So we'll get some even more wife drama in early Islam and how it explains the behavior of Mohammed Hijab. So again, not a repetition of the material today, not a summary of it, not a shorter version of it, but in the same ballpark of ideas. So complementary to one another. Yep. And that will be out sometime next week. I will later tonight, in an hour and a half or so, have a Bible study. You'll be redirected to that when this stream ends. So if you're interested, follow the link, set a reminder, and check back in an hour and a half for that. We'll be back with Mary on Tuesday. I'm thinking I won't be streaming tomorrow. I'll be doing some in-person evangelism tomorrow. I might stream on Sunday, probably stream on Sunday. I'm thinking of having a members-only live stream on Sunday to kind of give people updates on everything that I'm working on and get feedback on all that. Probably stream a couple times next week in addition to the Tuesday stream with Mary. So lots of stuff going out. Again, you can thank Lizzie Baby and you can thank Danae King for all the additional material. And January, I believe I released one video, which is a live stream. In February, I think it was 2 videos, 2 live streams. And now I'm doing like 5, 6 videos a week. So you can thank them for all the extra productivity. Be sure to support the ministry financially where you can, because I am without a job because of my good friends, Lizzie and Danae. Until we meet again, we'll close out in traditional fashion with the words of Pastor Jake.
Pray this ceaselessly. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me.